in equity and those kinds of fundamental kind of programs that we see people parading all around in the business community. But then we see the hashtags that continue to remind us that, yes, you are successful, that, yes, that you have made it, and, yes, that you can be successful. But what we realize is that you're still black. That the very skin that you're in literally writes your death certificate. And so we find our way into what Fluker begins to describe as cultural asylums and exilic jungles of blackness, meaning we have to have specific spaces or spaces that allow for us to be truly black and be proud to be black and be unapologetic in who we are. But then we have to turn back to sleep because we have to some point go back into the very world that's determined for us to die. And so this parasite finds its way into our very consciousness that causes a crisis, if you will, that really pushes us to not underestimate the very power of this racism and this white supremacy, but rather to make us comfortable in it. It doesn't seek to destroy it. It only seeks to be well-positioned. And so that very function in our spirits and in our souls to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly is somehow inebriated to the point of drunkenness, where we forget thee and we forget the very breath that we breathe, and we forget the very call that we have to be powerful beyond measure, to be prophetic, to remember. And so as we talk about the diagnosis of this parasite, this racist parasite, we have to talk about what you can prescribe for it to change. And so we make it very real in three ways as it relates to mental health. One, we must remember. In the way that we remember through this parasite of racism is that we must continue to call the names of those who had come before us, who have fought these fights before. But even much so, it gave us context of what it meant to be black men, what it meant to be black, what it meant to be divine, what it meant to be powerful. Call the name of the ancestors that still remain with us even here today. But it was important for us to realize that this memory, this prophetic memory, did not necessarily mean history. And it didn't mean history because we see that so many people have a memory of what America was so great at so long ago, and those kinds of memorial kind of services that reminded us of where we were. And it might not have been good to us, but they claimed that it was good for us, but somehow we still ended up with nothing. But not only must we remember, but we must also relive. We must find the ways to suspend our judgments as men, to suspend the experiences that we share so common with each other, to continue to make space for those voices that we often find in many ways pushing the margins. And that means that we must acknowledge the very depths of the patriarchal misogyny that continues to pervade in the African American community, to make space for women who were there for us and loved us, prayed for us, that cared for us. You see, we can't do this work. We can't answer the challenges of a dying world that continues to allow these kinds of parasites to exist. We can't do it with raw emotion. As men, as black men who somehow, some way always ends up at the root of every attack against white supremacy. That we must be willing and able to be vulnerable enough to get the kind of help that we need. Because if we don't process these emotions, this parasitic relationship between black malehood and white supremacy and racism, if we don't do the necessary work that our souls must have, in the words of the late ancestor Katie G. Kennan, to do the work our souls must have, we will die along with this world. And so as we prepare to challenge these institutions, we must also be willing to do the necessary heavy lifting of making sure our souls are whole. And so we also, in this work and in that moment of processing and preparing and reliving, that we are becoming our ancestors' wildest dream. And so they dreamed that one day that their children and their children's children will be able to holler out in their memory because they didn't give up. That they were willing to be in control of their destiny and to reclaim the very dignity of their bodies, the power of their minds, and the cleansing of their spirits. And so we become, as we do this work, we become the very objects of narration and narratives rather than being the narrators of objectivity ourselves. And so as I close, I want to simply challenge us to retell the story. After we realize who we are and we identify, that we are awake in the face of death, that we somehow found ourselves in a world that was determined that it was post-racial and that this very parasitic experience no longer existed. To remember the ancestor that came before us, to relive the very experiences of a people that were prepared to answer the challenges of life, and to become the wildest dreams of our ancestors. That we remember and we retell the story of a man that talked about in the Psalms, King David. He talks about, he says that you were created to be a little lower than the angels. And in the King James Version, we had to ask ourselves, what was the difference between the angels being created like an angel and being created a little lower than God? And that's really my message for black men, is that there's somebody somewhere is convinced that you are not worthy of the kind of dignity of being a little lower than God. And so in closing, I lift up the story, a very familiar story of David and Goliath. You see, David was a short man. He was about 5 foot tall. And in this story, David experiences the kind of world and community that literally convinces him that he is not worth even fighting up against his enemy. And so they laugh, they joke, but you see, we never really hear about what Goliath actually looks like. We never really see Goliath do anything other than talk, to do anything other than convince everybody around him that he was big and bad, to do anything but defend that which God had created. And so David, being the very divine, young man that he was, he literally walks up and he puts on this armor and he puts on these garments of protection, and he realized, he says, I needed none of that. It doesn't fit me. And so he goes into this battle that everybody thought he was unable to win. And he only goes with a simple slingshot and 3 smooth stones. And he goes up against this giant called Goliath, and Goliath just simply sits there, looks at him, and laughs. But then after this encounter, that David simply takes just 1 stone and hits him in the center of his forehead. And he takes down a giant with one hit. And you see, the interesting part of that story for us is that for many in this community and many who are watching, that black men literally are the ones who are counted out most often, that are put to the side, that are thrown in jail as if their very purpose is to serve others, to simply do nothing, to not defend the black race, to ensure that our people are taken care of, that we don't have to continue to allow that our children and our women and our friends and our loved ones continue to die at the hands of white supremacy. that we're simply considered as useless, that we might as well go back to fend with the sheep. But there was a moment where black men began to realize that we had been here before, that we had saw the Goliath, that we had defeated the enemy before, and that if only we were convinced that no longer did it stand a chance, that we could be successful, that we could be successful in our pursuit of justice, that we could be successful in our pursuit of family, that we could be successful in our pursuit of mental health and stability and community, but we had to simply believe. And if we only believed that we could make it and that we could win, that somehow, some way, the very parasites of racism would eventually go away, that would eventually be defeated. And so let us be prepared in this moment to continue to do that kind of work that our souls must have, not only for our own sake, but for the sake of our communities and the world at large. So now unto then, who is able to keep us from falling, and to present us faultless before thy throne with great and exceeding joy. To the only wise God, our Savior, be glory, majesty, dominion, and power, both now and forevermore. Amen.
All right. Wonderful, wonderful, Mr. Woodall. So, of course, my technology people have told me that we have had a few little errors with some luridness. Please do not be concerned. Everything will be recorded. Everyone will get to see everyone clearly. This is also being broadcasted on YouTube live stream at Brotherhood of Mental Health. But we are also using the Zoom platform as well. But my technicians are working on everything, so if you're seeing anything frozen or blurred or any type of way, just know that everything will be rectified and it will be okay. But I am going to start with my introduction again, just in case any of you did miss it, if there was some type of hiccup or frozen of any type. I'm going to start that over just one more time for you. So greetings again out there in virtual land. We just had a great keynote from Mr. Reverend Woodall, who is the NAACP State of Georgia President. I am Dr. LaCleisha Izzard, a licensed counselor, clinical supervisor, professional, and counselor, educator, and counselor leader. I am the standing president of the American Counseling Association of Georgia, and this is our inaugural multicultural symposium on African American male wellness. Our theme is unveiling the complexities of African American males through awareness with best counseling practices. So we are going to move forward with this great lineup. We have just heard from our keynote presenter, and now we're continuing to move forward. Our next presenter today will be Dr. Darren Cooper. Dr. Darren Cooper, licensed clinical social worker. Dr. Cooper has over 15 years of experience working as an advocate for children and their families, including clinical social work, child protective services, and school social work. Dr. Cooper currently works in counseling private practice, serving diverse populations of individuals and specializing in trauma. Dr. Cooper is also an ordained minister. Dr. Cooper is a graduate of Fayetteville State University, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and the University of Tennessee at Knoxville. He has also served our country as a United States Army veteran. And he will speak to us today about what's trauma got to do with it, uncovering hidden trauma among African American males. So without further delay, let's give a warm virtual welcome to Dr. Darren Cooper.
Thank you. God bless you. So I wanted to begin my presentation. I want to talk about what's trauma got to do with it, but I also want to look at African American men and mental health, and I want to ask a kind of a rhetorical question, if you will. Why is there still an unmet need? So just kind of think about that. So to begin with, I want to kind of make it personal. I want to tell my story. I want to look at this thing from a developmental framework, talking about kind of the roots of where all of this stuff begins. And so my story is all too common, unfortunately, in urban America, growing up as an African American male. We experience a lot of things, and we don't call it trauma because to us, we somewhat normalize it. It's just the way that we grew up. It's what we're used to. It's what we've seen. I myself, I was exposed to environmental trauma, if you will, community violence, domestic violence. I remember going to a bar with my father and seeing a fight break out, somebody's head being bashed with a bottle and blood everywhere. And I was, maybe 5 or 6 years old. My father had mental health problems. I remember him being a Korean War veteran, and he must have had PTSD because he pretty much terrorized our family. We lived in constant fear. I remember him telling me stories of just how things would mess with his mind, and he would have this violent way of thinking. And so I remember him having made threats and things of that nature toward the family, and us being afraid of him. And so growing up in these types of environments and experiencing these types of things, again, a lot of times it seems normal to us who are in it. It's not until we get out of it that resilience begins to kind of kick in and takes us down another direction for our lives. So what is the problem? I want to talk today about undiagnosed and untreated mental illness in the African American community, particularly amongst African American males. And so what is the prevalence rate of mental health problems in Black America? Well, first off, let's look at depression. So in the U.S. population, we have seen where depression rates in the overall general population is about 3%. Whereas with whites, that is 2.8%, but with African Americans, it's 4.3%. So that's a pretty high percentage per capita for African Americans. So we see there's a high incidence and a high rate of depression that's already there. When we look at anxiety, our numbers are not as high as the general population or as our white counterparts, but when we look at PTSD across all age groups, we see that African Americans lead that category by far. 7.8% compared to the U.S. population at 6.4%, and compared to our white counterparts, PTSD 6.9%. Again, ours is 7.8. When we look at substance abuse, again, we lead that category in prevalence at 10.5% compared to the U.S. population at 9.4 and our white counterparts at 9.5. Suicide is high among African Americans, although it's not as high as the national rate, but nonetheless, this is a problem. So let's talk about development. Let's talk about how psychopathology develops, okay? I want to look at it again from a developmental framework because we see where the seeds of this gets planted within us. It's at an early age. And so what are some of the risk factors of developing mental health problems? Well, adverse childhood experiences. Any experience in childhood that is adverse would be living in poverty, for example, having domestic violence in the environment, or even having sickness or illness, medical illness. All right. Again, community violence. Right now, we're dealing with another killing that's made national headlines. Okay, we grow up with these things. And how does it affect us? It affects us by giving us a sense of horror and dread at times because of how we react to it. All right, we make it personal. It could happen to me. And so, what are some of the other things that are risk factors for developing mental health problems? Employment status. Coming from a family where, parents maybe are unemployed quite often. Stress from work and job insecurity. On the flip side of that, let's look at some protective factors or some resiliency factors, some things that build strength and build resilience. If you have an early childhood experience where you have developed a secure attachment, where a child has developed a secure attachment with their caregiver, this begins to build some foundation of strength within that child that will buffer them and mitigate against developing the reaction to stress later on that will lead to mental health problems. Marriages. Having a strong family where there's a marriage there. Having perceived social support. These things bolster us and build resilience within us. Having higher income. Obviously that helps because it allows one to access more, such as health care. Having higher job status and job security, as well as adult achievement and sense of mastery. Okay, once your basic needs are taken care of and you have a stable foundation, then you can begin to try to achieve higher self-actualization. But you never get there if you're still dealing with housing insecurity, food insecurity, financial insecurity. Let's move on. So what are some of the reasons for the unmet needs in the mental health treatment for African Americans? Again, poverty, lack of trust. We all know the Tuskegee experiments and other stories of a part of the history of this country where African Americans have been concerned. There was forced sterilization decades ago. There's, again, experimentation and things of that nature. Even during slavery times, how blacks were experimented on by the medical establishment. So there's this history, this long, deep history of distrust, is there not? Also, there is of course, the negative stigma. It makes me, perhaps an African American man, for example, feel or look or perceived as weak, that he can't handle it on his own. And so these are some of the reasons why we don't seek treatment. But there are other barriers to treatment as well. There are disparities in health care. Now, there's been some significant legislation over the years. In most recent years, in 2008, the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act was passed, which helped to remove some of the barriers to mental health access. And then in 2010 was the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare, which also relieved us of released some of those limitations. But at the same time, we had problems in the economy. We had the Great Recession. And so a lot of people lost their jobs and they lost their employer-based health care, and there again, this lack of access to mental health treatment. Another problem that we see is that there's a lack of research. We don't have enough African Americans who volunteer to take part in, say, research and clinical trials and things of that nature that would help, providers and the scientific community, the medical establishment help them understand how best to treat us and how we react and how we respond to treatment. This would help to tailor those treatments, perhaps, to our unique needs. And so let's look at some of the treatment best practices. So how best can we meet the needs, or how best can the medical and mental health community reach the need of African Americans? Well, let's look at cultural competence. Enough can't be said about that. Cultural competence just means understanding, looking at the person through the lens of their own cultural practices and their own understanding. You know, for African Americans, for example, we like to include some spirituality. We're very faith-based, so many of us, being raised in the church, looking to God in faith and looking to Him for healing and, just looking to God. And so, just to incorporate some aspect of spirituality when you're attempting to treat an African American. And so let's look at some effective treatment modalities that behavioral health professionals can use when treating African Americans for trauma, for example. I myself am a trauma-focused therapist, and some of the things that I use are cognitive behavioral therapy, which attempts to, which says that we are a product of how we think, basically. Okay, our thinking affects our emotions, which affects our behaviors. And so we target the way that a person thinks, those cognitive, if you will, distortions, and we try to change some of that. Trauma-focused psychotherapies include trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, child and parent psychotherapy, as well as what's called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. That's another one that I use. And so all of these treatment modalities are possibilities. They are available to help us to overcome our trauma history and our trauma experiences. We need to recover. And so one of the last things I want to mention is, none of us have gotten here. This panel of experts and speakers, all African American men who are accomplished in their own way. None of us has gotten here just by chance, or definitely it wasn't easy. There was no silver spoons in our mouths. Most of us have had to overcome adversity. We've had to develop resilience in our own lives, and it's a blessing to be resilient and to use that resilience. And there are ways in which we can foster that resilience in our young people. And one of the things that we can do is, one, we can direct them to positive youth development type programs and activities. All of these things, again, build up the character of the person and foster resilience within them. Utilize early intervention programs that are available. And of course, the faith community. It's like the old African proverb that says that it takes a village to raise a child. So utilize that. I want to also just leave us with some thoughts of hope. There is light at the end of all of this. And again, fostering that resilience is what makes us gravitate toward that light. And we're in this together, and we are a community, and we will make it. We shall be strong with the help of the Lord. And I do want to leave us with a poem by Langston Hughes called Mother to Son. It says, "Well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it and splinters and boards torn up and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time, I's been a-climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So, boy, don't you turn back. Don't you set down on them steps, 'cause you finds it's kind of hard. Don't you fall now, for I's still going, honey. I's still climbing. And life for me ain't been no crystal stair. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Cooper. All right, we're on a roll, you all. All right. My tech people said we are good to go on both streams, but I am still going to do the introduction just in case it was froze for some individuals. Again, I am Dr. LaCleisha Izzard. I am the standing president of the American Counseling Association of Georgia, and this is our inaugural multicultural symposium on African American male wellness. Our theme for today is unveiling the complexities of African American males through awareness and best counseling practices. We've heard from our keynote this morning, the Reverend James Woodall, the president of the Georgia State chapter of the NAACP, and we just heard from Dr. Darren Cooper. He just spoke to us about trauma. Mr. Woodall spoke to us about the parasite, the insidious parasite of racism and microaggressions among African American men. You all, this is some great information and great knowledge. Please remember to put your questions into the comments box, put your questions into the chat box. We do want to hear from you. We want to make sure that you are getting this information. Of course, yes, it's being recorded, so you'll be able to have it afterwards as well, but let us know the information that you are getting on today. So without further delay, I am going to introduce our next presenter. His name is Mr. Darrell Russ, okay? Mr. Darrell Russ, of course, also needs no introduction. He's doing multiple things. He's a licensed counselor and a clinical supervisor. He's a board member with NAMI, Georgia. He's also a long-term member of the American Counseling Association. He's worked for the Atlanta Union Mission, downtown Atlanta. Darrell truly has committed his life to serving others, serving men, and doing everything that he can to be a help to our community. Just to share a little bit more about Mr. Russ, he owns Russ Counseling and Consulting, LLC, which was founded with an aim to provide a safe, supportive, and compassionate therapeutic space in which clients can begin to learn how to build healthy, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual practices as a path for healing. Mr. Russ has designed and implemented transformational clinical services that serve the underserved in Atlanta. Mr. Russ is a graduate of Liberty University. Let's give a warm virtual welcome to Mr. Darrell Russ. Come on up here, Mr. Russ. We're so happy to have you today.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to take a minute to get my slides ready, but it is an honor to be here, and so just bear with me 1 second. All right, so I think we're ready to roll. And again, if I get a little too excited, so just forgive me. Just forgive me. The title today is "Everywhere He Laid His Hat Was His Home." What a title! If you don't know, I'm gonna show my age here. That's an old Temptation song from "Papa Was a Rolling Stone." Wherever he laid his hat was his home. If you really examine that statement, it's a wonderful, beautiful melody, but it is a sad legacy. So today I want to talk about relationships, and maybe even I'm going to highlight one effective counseling therapy that I think will help empower the African American male and couples as they move forward. Because ultimately, I don't want my song to be "Everywhere He Laid His Hat Was His Home." I want a different title, and I want the same for you. So let's do this. I'm going to take a step over, and I'm going to walk through some slides with you. So just walk with me. So here's just some basic stats. So if you can't see it, I'll read it to you anyway. So here's a stat. It says the death rate for African American men was 4 times greater than African American women. There's a story behind that statistic. And we'll get back to the story and the need to share our stories. 4 times the rate. It says research has shown that African American men are statistically less religious than black women, but there's a however. However, still highly religious. So I want to give my African American male brothers some credit here. Compared to our white counterparts and white women, we're still the second highest, quote, religious people. So my sisters, kudos to you. My brothers, we'll get there after a while. It's okay. It's all right. Next, it says black couples report lower marital quality, higher marital dissatisfaction, and higher rates of divorce. This is a story we have to unpack because this is not the pathway to leaving a great legacy. Again, we don't want our song to be "Everywhere He Laid His Hat Was His Home," and we'll unpack that as we go. It says in 1960, 78% of black households included a married couple, but by 2016, the rate dropped to 29%. So we were almost 80% of households, right? So almost 80% of a household was a married couple, but by how many years is that later? 56 years later, it dropped. Wow, that's an issue for us. But we'll leave here today with some tools that maybe can help us change that statistic. So just stay tuned. All right, so there are some barriers to care. So why don't African American men seek help? What gets in the way? This is one of the questions we have to address. First and foremost, this concept of stigma. So in our culture, there is this term called "don't share our dirty laundry." But the dirty laundry will only get clean if we share the pain with someone that can actually help us. So I want to break that. There's another cultural phenomenon in our community called the concept of the culture of cool, meaning wear the mask, don't show your heart because you don't want to show any weakness. That is poison for the African American male. So here it says stigma concerns of black men related to mental health. It actually makes us not want to share and makes us not even seek help when we know we need it. That is not a legacy builder. Okay, keep that in mind. Again, we're talking about what gets in the way. What are some barriers to us receiving care? The second one is lack of knowledge, right? Somehow or another, we've gotten this picture generationally, this message has been sent that in some way I am weak if I ask for help. I am a man of faith, but also sometimes when things are out of balance in the church, we teach that somehow or another God is punishing me. That is nothing consistent about that in the scriptures that I'm familiar with. So that is just erroneous. So lack of knowledge. Next, family, community, and spiritual beliefs. Again, family, community, and spiritual beliefs, wonderful tool of support, but it doesn't have to be the only tool we use. So use that, but sometimes we need something a little stronger, like healthcare professionals, like professional counselors, family therapists. So here's how I would look at it. If you were going fishing, you wouldn't just use one lure. You would try multiple things to ensure you catch the fish. So one lure, one rod, why not put 3 or 4 rods out? That way you'll be sure to catch a fish, okay? All right, conscious or unconscious bias from providers. Now, here's something external to us. Sometimes the people we choose to go see, they might not have the knowledge or the awareness of the culture that you came from. I'm not saying you have to go to an African-American male counselor. I'm biased. I am one. But you want to ensure that that person has an understanding, a competency about the culture that you're coming from. What is impacting you? And we'll unpack that a little bit more later. All right, here are some additional things that get in the way of family relationships. Racial stressors. Now, I know prior to me, Reverend Woodall touched on some of this, so I'm going to hit this quickly. There are some racial stressors. The reality is, there is a daily reality of racism that African American males face, and it creates stress. I mean, it actually goes so far as the next bullet where it says, there's actually a systematic racism that is prevalent that is stress. And guess where that stress goes? It shows up in all our relationships. So just to make sure you're aware of that. And then the stress from racism, here's a study from Carter and Reynolds. It actually impacts our own self-esteem. It actually facilitates hypertension. You can imagine that type of stress is a contributor to hypertension. Okay, so we cannot ignore that. Racial stressors magnify in a couple's destructive communication. So if you're married or if you're in a relationship, you know if external stressors are weighing on you, we tend to project those in our relationships, knowingly or unknowingly. It's like that term you hear people say, well, I had a bad day, so I came home and kicked the dog. That's a bad analogy, but it unfortunately is realistic. We take it out on the ones we love. We have to do better because we want to leave a legacy. All right? Lastly, so racial stressors alone is enough. But when you compound that with relationship stress and our inability to cope because we don't share our pain, that combination is deadly. And guess what? It actually exacerbates the relational issues. And then that original slide where I showed you, now we understand why the divorce rate is so high. Now we understand why the suicide rate is so high. We talked about the culture of not sharing, the culture of cool, the culture that says don't air your dirty laundry, but it's not taking us to the outcome that we desire. Okay? All right, let's keep moving. So you said, well, that's all fine and good, but what can we do about it? And this is what I would call the empowering section. So these are some things I want you to, get your pen and paper or your smart device or whatever you use. Here are some counseling approaches and I would say techniques or even tools you should be using to ensure that you leave a legacy and your song, when you pass, isn't everywhere I laid my hat was my home. I want a different song for you. All right, here we go. So here's some strategies. So I'm going to highlight really one today, emotionally focused therapy. There are others, CBT, there are others, but today just for these purposes, let's just talk about this. So it is evidence-based, empirically supported with a 70 to 75% success rate. And that's what we want. We want to make sure that what we're using, if you decide to go see someone for your relational distress, that they're utilizing an approach that has evidence that what they're doing is working. Okay? Because certainly, like any other, if you go to a doctor, you don't want them to prescribe something for you that has a 10% chance of working. That's a waste of time, and that's a waste of money. So that's first of all. Okay? Second, this is a critical term. I'm going to break it down. It's called empathic attunement. Basically, what it says is you want to make sure that the clinician or the professional counselor or the psychotherapist you're seeing has empathetic attunement. Fancy way of saying, are they in tune enough with my culture and have a respect for the stressors that I'm experiencing. Whether they agree with it or not or understand it or not, they respect me enough to be empathetic toward me, to stay in tune with what I'm telling them, because they know I'm taking a risk simply by telling them. So if you're with a clinician who is telling you that experience is invalid, they do not have empathetic attunement, and you might want to take your dollars somewhere else. So empathetic attunement with clients' emotional experience is a core competency. In other words, if they're not doing that, if they can't establish that relationship, that therapeutic rapport, you're wasting your time. That 70 to 75% effective rate for this approach is gone out the window because they cannot be in tune with you. Okay. Again, we're talking about effective counseling strategies. Next, so it says here, to be successful with black couples, not only do you have this attunement, right, to the issue of race, but also they have to be understanding that the effects of racial pain and stressors that are in the relationship. So there has to be an understanding that this African-American man is facing things in the workplace, in the legal system. There's mass incarcerations. He brings that into the clinical setting. We have to attune to that, first of all, and then understand how that might be spilling over into the relationship. Okay? If we can't compartmentalize this, this is a whole person. How they are at work, how they are at home, it's the same person. So we have to help the African-American male unpack this, okay, to be successful. All right? Here we go. Here's another one. Clinicians must understand why fear of vulnerability is an understandable response to persistent negative stereotypes. And you can read the rest, but essentially what it's saying is we shouldn't question, why would you feel that way? If that statement comes out, it's nullifying this person's experience. So the clinician has to understand that there may be a fear of vulnerability. Again, we talked about culture. The culture says don't open up. The culture says don't air the dirty laundry. The culture says wear a mask. The culture says don't embarrass the family. But this individual has taken a risk and come to the office. So as a clinician, we must understand that there may be a fear of vulnerability and see it as understandable. It makes total sense if I'm coming from that culture, okay? All right. Let me back up. But this last piece, I don't want us to miss this. But also, gender role expectations can be problematic for couples as well. When we say gender role expectations, let's unpack that. So first, it says, facing systemic workplace discrimination and mass incarceration, black men struggle for economic parity in the workplace. So and then many men struggle to meet the patriarchal definition of provider. Okay, here we go. So if, as an African-American man, I'm subscribing to that, I'm the man, I provide, my wife takes care of the children, and I'm not saying you should or should not have that view, but if you do have that view and you're in a relationship, that's not your reality. Because the reality is African-American women are having higher education, success, advancement at work, which in a healthy relationship is great for the relationship. But if the African-American man has a perspective that I'm the patriarchal, I'm the man, then I will have problems because my reality may not meet up. My reality will not meet up to that expectation. Okay? So again, it says here, black women's advancement in education and career may further inflame the relationship, of course. So if I have a perspective that I'm the one that's supposed to be the breadwinner and she's the breadwinner, it's going to cause friction. It is an issue. And I'm going to be honest, I'm proud to say that my wife makes significantly more than me, but guess what? I enjoy the benefits of it. And that's the perspective I would love for you to have. All right, here we go. This gender economic reality contradict with the expectations, right? This is from Stanek, McHale, and Crowder. Again, it says it may actually cause men to have silent anger toward their partners, right? So I go to work, I don't have a voice, I may be facing some systematic racism there, I maybe have some challenges in the legal system, maybe not finding the justice I'm looking for. Then I come home and I have this expectation that I'm in the traditional model that I am the man and I am the provider, and if that's not a reality, then it can fuel silent anger that manifests itself in very negative ways. All right. We kind of talked about this. So basically what it says, if we believe that paradigm of the husband in that patriarchal system, that honeymoon phase is going to be over early. So you can just forget about it. Let's just call it what it is. You can forget about it because your reality is not matching your expectation. All right. So it says, black men unable to meet the breadwinner ideal, this is what we talked about earlier, may cling to assertions of male power and privilege at home because they feel like that's the only place they can feel like a man. That is not balanced. That is not healthy. Okay? That is not, and this is from a study by Chambers and Kravitz in 2011. And I think this makes sense. So, I mean, the research is great, but I think intuitively you know that if we're holding on to these type of assertions of male power, it's going to cause a problem at home. It's going to cause a problem at home. Let's just call it what it is. All right. We're bringing the plane down here. So here's something you want to consider when you're looking for a therapist. You want to make sure that they have competence, cultural competence. I mean, that's a fancy way basically saying is that person needs to have a respect and understanding of your culture, their own and yours. Not just, so my culture can get in the way of me being able to hear your story. So I need to be able to, I mean, we mentioned earlier, empathic attunement is critical for success in this model. It says when meeting your provider, here's some questions you should ask to figure out if they have cultural sensitivity. So you say, wait, I can actually ask questions of my therapist? Yes, you should be asking questions of your doctor. You should be asking anybody you're paying, you can ask questions. You go to the restaurant and they bring you the wrong dish, you should be asking questions, okay? All right, here's some questions. Have you ever treated other African Americans? You say, oh, that's kind of rude. No, you're looking for cultural competency. Have you received training in cultural competency or on African American mental health? It's a great question. If they say no, then you can explore and you can make a decision. How do you see our cultural backgrounds influencing our communication and my treatment? Great question. Integrate my beliefs and practices into my treatment. So we say, so if you come in, maybe you have spiritual beliefs. Your spiritual beliefs may conflict with that clinician's beliefs, and then that way you can make a decision. Because you want a holistic, you want somebody that sees you as a whole person. Okay? All right. Now I'm going to close with these last two. So there's an organization, and Dr. Izzy already spoke to earlier that I'm on the board of NAMI, which is the National Alliance of Mental Illness, and they have a program that really helps educate and bring awareness to the African American community. Okay, it's called Sharing Hope Program. It's basically an hour-long education program. It talks about the signs and symptoms of bipolar, schizophrenia, depression, and other disorders. It really helps us to talk about mental health and decrease stigma. This is a big one. It helps with the language. How we talk about mental health is critical. The language we use. We know those words we use that are very negative as it relates to mental health. Okay, so we want to, in the African American community, African American men in particular, the stigma is a barrier to us leaving the legacy we want to leave. Okay? And then it gives an overview of recovery and how it's possible. And then it also provides the types of mental health services and supports available. So this is just one snippet, one resource that's available to you as well. And this is my contact information. I am a professional counselor. If I can be a resource to you in any way, I'd be more than willing to assist you. But what I want to end this with is, again, we started with, the title is Everywhere He Laid His Hat Was His Home. And in that song, there's a line where he says, Mama, I'm depending on you to tell me the truth. The question is, as an African-American man, are you willing to go and see someone when you need help and tell them the truth so that you can get the help that you need, so that you can be fully present in your relationships, in your dating relationships, in your work relationships, in your marriage? Because I don't want this song to be your song. I want your legacy to be something different than this. Not a Rolling Stone, but I want you to be the rock of your family. That cornerstone, that legacy builder. So I appreciate the time, and it's simply been a pleasure to connect with you. And again, if I can assist you in any way going forward, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you for being here on today. That was Mr. Russ. Everywhere he laid his hat was his home. And I know you all remember the old Temptation song. Wherever he laid his hat was his home. Like he said, we don't want that to be our men's song any longer. Again, welcome back. I am Dr. LaCleisha Izzard, the standing president for the American Counseling Association of Georgia. And you, if you've just tuned into us, you are now witnessing a history-making event, our inaugural multicultural symposium on African American male wellness. Our theme today is unveiling the complexities of African American males through awareness and best counseling practices. We have already heard from our keynote, the Reverend James Woodall, who is the president of the NAACP of Georgia chapter. And also, we have heard from Dr. Darren Cooper, who we just figured out that we have some questions for. So I am going to bring Dr. Cooper up, and I am going to ask him one of the questions that was asked to him. You can stand right over there, Dr. Cooper. Dr. Cooper, the question for you is, Dr. Cooper, given the barriers to treatment for Black men, what suggestions do you have, or if you have any suggestions as it relates to getting them into therapy? I'll say it one more time. Dr. Cooper, given the barriers to treatment for Black men, what suggestions do you have for getting them into therapy? If so, what would be your suggestions?
So, from my experience working as a professional, I know that for us African Americans, we do like to find African American practitioners. So that would be my suggestion. Find somebody who looks like him, and then I would suggest also maybe you, if you want to refer him to somebody, maybe you're a loved one, maybe you're a spouse, maybe if you could reach out to that practitioner in advance and, just kind of make sure that this is going to be a good fit before you even introduce that Black man to that practitioner. So that would be my suggestion. I know cost sometimes is a barrier. I myself, I use a sliding fee scale. So I can adjust my fees to accommodate a person's financial picture. I even do pro bono work, but again, it's up to the practitioner. Somebody may be willing to work with them. So just to overcome some of these barriers that was mentioned. Hopefully that helps.
All right, one more question for you. You just in the hot seat today, Dr. Cooper. So we got another question that came up from you, and this is from Janae as well. She says, another question from Dr. Cooper. Is there evidence to show that trauma-focused modalities are especially effective for our men, for African American males? Oh, that's a big one.
Well, and that's a great question, but, and honestly, I have not read any research that talks about how a modality is especially effective with African American males. One thing I would suggest is that there are different modalities. So try whatever, whatever works, whatever that person finds effective for them. I don't think there's any one size fits all for any particular ethnic group, but I would suggest, just try and see what's out there and see if it works.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Cooper. Those are all the questions for you on today, at least for right now. Again, you all, please put your comments, put your questions in the chat box so that we can thoroughly engage with you. We want to know what you're learning. We want to know what you're curious about. And we just want to make sure that you are getting the knowledge that you need on today. So we're going to take just a brief break before we bring up our next presenter. We are going to pause just for a minute. I was told that there is a surprise for me. So I am going to go and see exactly what this surprise is. I've been told to bring up Mr. Brooks to give him the mic. And I guess I'll go and find out what this surprise is. So you can come on up, Mr. Brooks. He is definitely on his way so that I can see what this surprise is for me, Madam President.
All right. As you can see, I'm Mr. Brooks, part of the Brotherhood of Mental Health, the next episode, and C2G2 Media Group. And we are here to give a recognition award to the president, Dr. Lakeisha.
Lakeisha.
Okay.
Oh, you done got me.
Hey, man,
It's all right.
Steve did it one time. I can do it too. Okay, so all right. So Dr. Izzy,
Yep.
that's what I'll do.
See, they so used to calling me Dr. Izzy. I know my mother is out there watching in virtual land. See, Mama, they messing up your baby name. Dr. Lakeisha Izzard, also known as Dr. Izzy. Go ahead. Keep it moving.
So Dr. Izzy, because I'm not going to try to mess
You're
that
not gonna
name up
butcher
one
it.
more time. Oh, no. I already did it enough, so I'm not going to do it this time. But we are here to give you a recognition award for a founding member of the American Counseling Association of Georgia. And we wanted to give this to you on your inaugural event here. Although we're doing it virtually, I'm quite sure that so many people out here are clapping for you and saying, praise God, congratulations. And these are the things that we want to share with you and many more to come with the ACA of Georgia and the things that you're doing in the community as well.
Okay, well, you stand right here before we show the viewers. I want to make sure I give them a special thank you.
Oh, you want
Just
okay.
one moment, you all.
So they got me holding this mic and this plaque here, man. So it's a busy day.
Yeah, of course you all. They thought that they got me, but I was sure something like this.
Oh,
was
you
gonna
was
happen.
ready to? Okay, so you're ready.
Just in case I got some.
Okay, so we're gonna show
We
it
gonna
this
show
one.
that to
We'll show it
everybody.
to everybody here.
This is my beautiful recognition award, you all. Again, I am the standing president of the American Counseling Association of Georgia. This has been an amazing term this year. Thank you so much. I'll
You're
take
welcome.
the mic
You
now.
gonna take the mic? Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
I'm gonna take the mic.
You want me to walk away with this?
Just as long as you don't take it.
Oh, it got your name on it. I can't put it on my stuff. Okay.
Thank you. So I do want to say a special thank you to Mr. Dow Brooks. He has just been an amazing, amazing support for me going through my term as president. Also, he has given me so many kind words in helping me to understand what it means to be a president. He was the first African-American male president for the Licensed Professional Counseling Association of Georgia right here in the state of Georgia. So we thank him for his service as well. But I had a few things that I did jot down that I wanted to say thank you as it relates to when it comes to being in a president role. And my main thing is just understanding servant leadership. Servant leadership is key. Servant leadership is critical as it relates to serving as a president. And for this year, my theme has been collaboration in action through professional development, advocacy, and service. And my vision for this year has been collaboration and community partnerships in impactful excellence. And I am so happy and ecstatic to say that I have seen that manifestation on this year. I have seen it come to pass by impacting so many people's lives, even with this symposium on today that I had the idea for. I'm just so grateful that I was able to lead, develop, and come up with an amazing strategic plan for this year to ensure that our ACA of Georgia members and our community partners, that they all were able to receive so much great knowledge and be impacted. I'm reminded of what my pastor, Dr. Kerwin B. Lee, has always taught us as a congregation. When it comes to service, we should not just strive to be impressive, but we should be impactful. And I'm so thankful for that wisdom for him. Coming in as a president, you need to hear all of the great wisdom that you can get in order to maneuver through your year. So again, I am so grateful. And without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started back into our amazing symposium. We have already had 3 dynamic presenters come on up and do an amazing job. Now we're getting ready to hear from another amazing presenter. His name is Dr. Calvin Ellison. He is an expert when it comes to nutrition. He's also certified as a nutritionist. He is also a naturopathic doctor. So he is going to talk to us today about manpower, combating the physical health and mental health plague among African American males. You all sit back. This is something that is so important with what we're experiencing today with COVID-19. We need to understand more about our men's health, about our community as a whole. Right now, the state of Georgia has a 40% rate of infections as it relates to African Americans with COVID-19. So we want to get this great knowledge for him and understand what it means to take care of our men and their health. So without further delay, let's give a virtual welcome to Dr. Calvin Ellison. Woo, I can hear them clapping. I can hear them clapping.
Well, thank you, Dr. Izzy. It is such a pleasure, and we applaud you for your great leadership and what you have done in bringing this symposium about. Okay, to my brothers, and everybody that is listening, I want to begin by saying your number one wealth, of course, and we know this, is our health. All right, so I want you to sit back, tighten your seat belts if you would, get your pen and paper if you don't have it, and please take some notes. All right, first of all, I do want to show something I brought with me to the symposium, and I usually take this somewhere. Just about everywhere I go. And it is my smoothie. I have a salad in a glass. Now, I want you to look at the tacticalness of this. I have a salad in a glass. Now, usually, just about anywhere I go, if I'm traveling out of the country, traveling from state to state, I will take some type of a food with me, all right, or some food with me. In this glass, I have kale, I have celery, I have spinach, I have a cucumber or some cucumber, I have a date, or 2 dates actually, walnut, I have also a pecan. Inside of this, I have a salad in a glass. Now, what am I saying by presenting this to you? You've got to develop a consciousness of your environment, number one. All right, 4 words I want you to focus on. I want you to, as it pertains to African American health, I want you to focus on culture/environment. I want you to focus on relationship. What are your relationships like? I want you to focus on diet/lifestyle. And I also want you to focus on your mentality. What we're going to also add to that as your psychoneuroimmunology. In other words, it's a word that basically says the study of your mentality and how it affects your immune system. Psychoneuroimmunology. But I brought this salad in a glass because I'm aware of usually what's going on in my culture. All right? I'm aware of the kind of fuel that the body needs. You see, the body is just like a vehicle. It needs water, gas, and oil. Now, you wouldn't think about driving your vehicle anywhere, or you couldn't drive it without gas. You got to have gasoline. The car's not going to crank if it doesn't have fuel. And you and I know the body's got to have water as well. You know the devastations that could happen to an engine when there's no water in the car. So it's got to have water, gas, and oil. You wouldn't think about trying to drive your car anywhere without oil. The body needs the same. Water to the body is just like water to the car. Now, if you remember in biology class years ago in school, or maybe in college, you found out that the body was made up of 2/3 water, not 2/3 soda or 2/3 tea, 2/3 water. So the body's got to have water just like the vehicle has got to have water. Then the body has got to have, like the vehicle, it's got to have oil. What does the oil look like in your body? How much oil are you putting in on a regular basis? Because see, you know, as humans, we're going to utilize what we put in. So you got to refuel. You got to give the body what you used up the last day, the last week, the last month. So what does the oil look like? What is oil to the body like oil is to a car? Well, oil for the body is your fats, your essential fatty acids that you can get in the form of flaxseed oil, fish oil, black seed oil, hemp oil. Your body has got to have the oils. By the way, your brain is 60% fat. So you got to have fat in your diet, or what I call the oils, like it is for the vehicle. And then lastly, you've got to have fuel. What is body fuel like car fuel, gas is for the vehicle or the car? What is body fuel? The quality of the food that you put in. Now, I shared with you earlier, in my smoothie, I have spinach, kale, celery, parsley, I have nuts, I have dates, and I'll put sometimes the strawberry as well as the blueberries in it. I have powerful fuel. I have food in its best condition, raw. Am I saying not to eat cooked foods? Absolutely not. But I'm saying this, if you want your vehicle, the vehicle of your body to operate, brothers, please, come on now, go with me, brothers, because it's been said for many years, brothers don't take care of themselves. We got to take care of ourselves. You need to go to the doctor. You need to know your numbers. Just like we know the stuff on the dashboard of the car, we know how much gas we've got in that vehicle. You know, that oil light will come on if you don't have enough oil. The water, the temperature thing will go too far to the right if you don't have enough water in there and the car runs hot. So you need to know your numbers. You need to know your numbers as it pertains to the prostate. You need to know how much water are you literally putting in your vehicle. What is the quality of the fuel? You see, some vehicles won't run off of 87 octane gas or fuel or 89. They need 93. And when it comes down to the best vehicle that God Almighty, that God created, He's the creator of the human vehicle, the human body, you got to give it top quality food. You can't give your body dead foods and expect to have an energetic body. It's not going to happen. You need to be thinking in terms of giving your body 93 octane. Well, what is 93 octane? Making sure you get raw food in your body on a regular basis. I would say daily. There are a lot of benefits from raw food. It's food in its best condition. It's food that's loaded with your minerals and vitamins, of course, unless it has some herbicides or some pesticides or some of that foolish stuff. Nobody wants to put that in consciously, all right? So you got to give your body good fuel, good quality fuel. Now, you can get your raw food in the form of a salad if you want to do that. Now, I like the smoothie. because it's already like pre-digested. But whether you get it through a smoothie or whether you're getting it in a salad, you need good quality food. Now, I mentioned 4 words to you. I'm going to go back and talk about those 4 words and tie in some of what's happening with this COVID-19 ordeal to give you some information to where you can be promoting your health versus fighting disease. I'm on a mission to help you promote or to empower you as well to promote your health versus fight disease. We're spending too much time fighting disease versus promoting our health. I believe if we spent more time promoting our health, we'll have stronger body militias. What is that, Dr. Ellison? What is the militia of the body? What I call your immune system. Your immune system will be stronger if we spend more time promoting our health versus fighting disease. Do you know you have also a spiritual immune system? Mm-hmm. You have a spiritual immune system. You have a mental immune system, as well as we understand a physical immune system. And I want to help you increase the quality of the operation of your immune system. 4 words that I gave you. And those 4 words, again, is culture. Now, all of these areas are factors when it comes down to your well-being, your culture, the environment that you were raised in. Culture is a way of life that a particular group of people have. And inside of the culture is your beliefs, your values, your behaviors. All of this is culture. And other things too, no doubt, is culture. Now, you and I were born into culture. You see, I'm from eastern North Carolina, the backwoods of Grifton, North Carolina there. Moved here to Stone Mountain, Georgia, over 4 years ago. My girlfriend, my wife of 37 years. Now, I deliberately mentioned that in hopes of getting some brownie points with her, but also to talk to you about the culture of our relationships. So we're all born into culture. And inside of our culture there in eastern North Carolina, like it is in many places in the United States and around the world now, in places to where people are adopting our lifestyle, particularly the SAD diet. You ever heard of the SAD diet? The standard American diet with the trans fats and foods oftentimes that we eat that insects won't even bite into. Duh, come on now. If an insect doesn't want to bite into that particular food item, I've got no business putting it in my body. All right? But these are things that are inside of the SAD diet that other cultures have begun to adopt. All right? So you've got to consider your culture. What does your culture, how does it eat? What kind of foods? When do we eat in our culture? You know, I used to think it was okay. I used to think I was like Superman. Years and years ago, I can eat any time of the night that I want and still have the kind of life that I really want to have health-wise. It's not true. I found out it's not true. You can't eat that steak and potatoes and gravy and all that stuff 10 o'clock at night and expect you're going to be energized the next day. You're working while you're sleeping. Your body's having to work while you're sleeping. So just a few thoughts about culture. You need to consider if you're going to have quality health, brothers, and we got to take the lead. Our sisters have been carrying this for too long. It should be that we brothers are leading the way to healthy lifestyles, to healthy living. We should be the models. After all, we're the leaders of the home. We should be leading the way. So we should be doing the studying. We should make sure that we're going to the doctor on a regular basis and leading our families to get those examinations. We should be leading the way. Like priest, like people. Like leader, like people. So we've got to take the responsibility of setting a good culture of health in our families. So I mentioned to you culture. All right, then the next word that is a very important factor on our health, and I wish I had time to talk more about culture, and that is your relationships. You know, since the virus has been going on, a lot of phones have been ringing off the hook about domestic violence. See, that speaks to the fact that there's some issues that were going on that we need to just simply correct, that were going on in some of these relationships the whole while. While two people who've been married for 15 years, they're struggling to get along. Now that we've got more time together, because of the virus. So we got to consider our relationships, the quality of our relationships, because your relationships affect your health. And there again, brothers, we've been selected by God Almighty to lead the way, to set the atmosphere, the temperature of how we relate in our homes. Because hear me, how you relate to your wife, your children, people that you hang out with on a regular basis affects your health. Yes, it does. And then that other word, your diet. I talked about that a little bit. You want to make sure that you're drinking good quality water. You see, every time you breathe, every time you urinate, every time you feces, every time you sweat, you're utilizing water. And it's got to be replenished. You can't go around like I've counseled a lot of people over the years, and I've had a lot of them say, Dr. Ellison, I hate water. I don't like the taste of it. Well, where did you get that from? You see, you got to realize we trained our taste buds. And I did it too. I used to feel good coming home, bringing 3 of those 64-ounce sodas home, and while I'm providing for my family. And I had all types of other stuff. I had some items in the bag that God told us don't eat. I had the pig's tail. I had his feet. I had his ears. I had his intestines. We call the pig's intestines, we like to dress words up so we can feel good about what we're eating. See, but in actuality, when we're saying chitterlings, you know how we say chitterlings. No, you're really eating the hog's intestinal tract. Ago, unless you're still eating that stuff, we be having some chitlins being prepared, and you say, hold up, let me get the spray and just spray the house, because the chitlins were smelling the house up. You're eating the hog's sewage system. I don't care how you dress that word up, saying, well, I'm eating chitterlings, a slab of cornbread and some slaw. No, you were not getting chitterlings. You were getting the hog's intestinal tract. To the food that you eat, is your food loaded with the terms of the names of items that a third grader can't read? Bisphenol A, sodium benzoate, MSG. What's in your food? You need to know what's in your food. Don't trust people like that. See, years ago when we used to produce our own food, we knew what was in our food. Yeah, because we planted the garden. We put the fertilizer there. What kind of fertilizer is being used on your food? Where is your food coming from? Who's producing your food? How is the food being produced? See, we need to know these things, because the Bible says the curse without a cause does not come. In other words, you don't just get sick in ordinary conditions, all right? We understand that there are some extremities, but normally, I believe for the perpetuation of sickness and disease anywhere is that we're out of sync with the wisdom of our Creator. Oh yeah, we're out of sync with the wisdom of God. We've left home from God's wisdom, and we become like prodigal sons and daughters. We eat any kind of old way, any kind of old time, any kind of old thing, and we expect good health. No, we got to get back in sync with the laws that govern good health. The Garden of Eden was a prime place to show us how to be healthy. While they were in the garden, they had harmonious relationships. They got sunlight. They had clean water. They had pure foods. Their thoughts were pure. Their thoughts were in sync with the Creator. Now, I just gave you right then some cues, some clues, some information as to how to promote your health versus fighting disease. All right? So you got to think about the quality of the food. You got to think about the water amount that you get, the quality of relationships, and then as it pertains to the symposium today, your mental state. But see, all of this is coming out of your culture. You and I are the product of culture. Again, I gave you those 4 words: culture, relationships, diet/lifestyle, and mentality. What do you think about on a regular basis? What are your thoughts like? Come on, let's get still for just a moment and be deliberate. How do I think on a regular basis? Do I think positively? How do I think about my wife? How do you think about your neighbor? How do you think about your brother or your sister in the church? How do you think about people? See, I learned years ago that every cell in your body comes to the attention of your thoughts. So what you think matters because it has a lot to do with your mental well-being, all right? Now, oh my God, I know the time has slipped away, but I want to add some stuff in this presentation about what's going on in the African American community as it pertains to the coronavirus, all right? Now, we know, most of us know by now, are aware that African Americans are suffering and dying disproportionately of the coronavirus. Now, I'm talking about when you got states like Illinois. African Americans make up 16% of the population, but 30% of those diagnosed with the virus. In Michigan, we make up around 15% of the population, but yet 35% of the people diagnosed with the virus are African Americans. In Louisiana, African Americans make up about 1/3 of the population, but 70% of the diagnosis of the viruses is coming from African Americans. Something's wrong with that picture. Some speculate that the pre-existing health conditions are contributing to racial disparities. Oh yeah, I agree with that too. Pre-existing conditions. Like some health advocates, I argue this. Structural conditions that inform pre-existing conditions and health disparities is a main culprit for the epidemic within the pandemic. Did you hear what I just said? There's an epidemic that's been going on in the pandemic, and it starts with the structural conditions that oftentimes we as African Americans are raised in. We got to consider it. Now, structural conditions, culture, synonymous in this presentation, all right? What are our structural conditions like? I want to talk about that for just a few moments before closing. Structural conditions that cause racial health disparities, such as the lack of healthy food options in our communities, the lack of green spaces, recreational facilities, lighting, and safety. We're talking about structural conditions that are there in our community. In many African American communities, it's not safe to go out and walk down the streets. On the street corner, the lighting is not good. The environment is just not as good as what it is oftentimes in Caucasian and other environments. Structural conditions. These subpar neighborhoods are rooted in the historical legacy of redlining. Oh yeah. Additionally, blacks are more likely to live in densely populated areas, further heightening our potential to contact with other people. So what does that lead to? Problems, physically. Because the structural conditions are oftentimes, we're talking about historical structural conditions, are not up to par, as it is maybe in some of the other cultures. Then we're talking about why we are being diagnosed in the African American community. What about the work? Now, the laws are now, the doors are being opened, just go back to work. I think we need to go back to work with caution. We need to go back to work with wisdom. Regarding work, think about this. African Americans blacks are more likely to be a part of the new COVID-19 essential workforce. In other words, the essential workforce represents nearly 30% of the bus drivers, 30% are African Americans. We represent nearly 20% of all food service workers, janitors, cashiers, and stockers. And we wonder why we're being diagnosed with it. We're talking about working conditions. What about climate also? And I'm just about finished. Climate. Climate also creates challenges in the black community. Predominantly black neighborhoods are more likely to be exposed to pollutants, toxins. Remember the Flint, Michigan, the Detroit, that corridor, and the lead and how the lead affected our health. We're talking about now why black people, African American men, African American people, period, are being diagnosed with the disease over our other counterparts. And then, oh Lord Jesus, criminalization plays a major role in health disparities too. It almost seems like it's unsafe for a black man to walk down the street. You know, we're talking about why are we where we are. But I want to encourage you with this. Go back and look at your culture, and you be a part of helping your culture to get better. You better your lifestyle. You better your eating habits. You model good, healthy eating and good, healthy lifestyle. All right? Then secondly, as I mentioned that second word, relationship, you model how to get along with your mate, how to get along with your brothers and sisters. Be a model of it. Then that third word that I gave you culture. I gave you relationships. Then I gave you diet. You model good eating habits. And then lastly, mentality. What do you think about? What are your goals? What are your aspirations? What's your purpose? You model in that particular area. We know the challenges are out there, but with God, all things are possible. Come on, with God, all things are possible. But I want to encourage you, we can do better. We can create a better environment, a better culture. But it doesn't start with the government. It doesn't start with the hospital. No, it doesn't start with the health department. It starts with you. And it starts with me. God bless you. Love you so much. Dr. Izzy.
All right, so we got a question for you, Dr. Ellis.
Oh.
Oh. You've been putting it on him. You've been putting it on him today. All right, so the question says that for some individuals, even African American males within our communities, it's hard for us to get some of these healthy foods, fruits, veggies, desserts. Most of the time, vegetables, all the good healthy things that we need to be eating. How can we get these in a way that is inexpensive?
Well, and that is truly a challenge. But I'll give you one way that we can do it. We can go back to our roots. Get a pot, get you some seed, get you some soil, and start raising some stuff in the environment of your own home. Then you know what's in that. You know what's in that pot. You know what you are raising. That is one piece of information that we can all do. We can do more of that. We got those pots. The opportunity is there. Think about raising some of your own food.
Sounds good to me. Thank you, Dr.
My pleasure.
Ellison. Woo! Big hand clap for him, you all. Thank you so much for that very informative presentation on physical health and mental health and our African American men. Something that we own gardens in your yard, planting fruits, vegetables in your home in Rubbermaid containers. Just go to Pinterest, go to YouTube, like what we're on right now, live stream, and find out how to do some of these things. It's actually not as difficult as many of us think. And then you'll have your own organic fruits and vegetables at home, and you won't have to worry about the high prices because you will be growing it yourself. But that's just a suggestion of mine. All right, so we're going to get back into this symposium. We have some questions. And again, I am Dr. LaCleisha Izzard, the standing president for the American Counseling Association of Georgia. For those of you who are just tuning in and joining us, we are having our inaugural multicultural symposium on African American male wellness. And we have already had 4 dynamic presenters. We have had the president of the NAACP of Georgia chapter, Reverend James Woodall. We have also had Dr. Darren Cooper. We have had Mr. Darrell Russ. And I'm getting ready to bring up Mr. Darrell Russ again because we have some questions for him. Come on up, Mr. Russ. Okay. This was very important to have one of our African American men state, and this is from our live stream. He stated that when you talked about everywhere he laid his hat was his home, it really resonated with him. It really how to go about getting help. Can you give him some insight?
Absolutely. So, I think even in my presentation, I said if you wanted to reach out to me, I'm a resource. Because the reality thing about resources know resources. So your only thing that I would encourage you to do is take a step. Whether it's me, I actually gave you NAMI's NAMI as a resource. But for you, reach out. If you want to come to me first, and we'll see how that works. Again, use your network. So thank you, Dr. Izzy, for even bringing this together so that that question can be asked so a resource could be available. So you're doing your part, so we're just asking this gentleman to do his part and reach out.
Absolutely. We got one more question from you, from our Zoom platform. This question says, Mr. Russ, what are your thoughts on African American males being misdiagnosed, and therefore causing fear and mistrust of even going to a mental health professional?
Outstanding question. Outstanding question. So let's be crystal clear and quite honest. Historically, there has been a history of misdiagnosing. But in my presentation, I talked about being empowered to interview the people, the clinicians that you're considering engaging with, because that way, because one of the questions was, do you have any experience or any cultural competency working with African Americans? Because what you're trying to gauge is, are they just looking to put a label on you, or are they looking to really actually serve you? So what I would suggest is, truly you want a clinician that has a heart for what they're doing. There's a term I use in the presentation called empathetic attunement, meaning they are coming into the session with a heart to hear, not based on their own biases, but they're listening for your experience and trying to make that, try to help you move from those experiences to your actual goal. So yes, historically there has been misdiagnosed, but here's the other piece we cannot ignore. There has been studies done with African American men historically that created some of this mistrust. Tuskegee comes to mind. However, that is not a license not to get help. That was then, this is now, but what I would say is you are empowered to make decisions and leverage the resources of clinicians and therapists that have a cultural awareness and a cultural competence to serve you and are actually looking for the least restrictive diagnosis possible, if necessary. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Russ. You're welcome. All right. So I got a little feedback from my tech guys, you all, said that I need to speak into the mic a little bit clearer. So I'm going to say those questions again to make sure that everyone heard them. And if you want to piggyback and say something else, you just let me know, Mr. Russ. But the first question, or should I say it was a comment, and this gentleman was saying that Mr. Russ, his actual presentation really spoke to him on a deep level, and that he did not have insurance, and he wanted to know what were some ways that he could go about seeking counseling and therapy. And Mr. Russ, you let me know if I'm right or wrong, but Mr. Russ said that he's a resource. I've been a resource by bringing this symposium together, absolutely, because we're bringing awareness. And all he needs to do is contact Mr. Russ, and Mr. Russ can connect him to who he needs to be connected with, or he can go and see Mr. Russ, because Mr. Russ is a licensed professional counselor. All right. And the next question was to Mr. Russ on African American males being misdiagnosed. And when they get misdiagnosed, there is a mistrust. And so how are we working together to help our men as it relates to that issue? And I think you spoke well to that, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. All right, so we are going to jump further back into this symposium and bring up our next dynamic presenter, Mr. Bill Carruthers. All right, Mr. Bill Carruthers has participated in many community-related events and services. He spoke at countless organizations and symposiums and conferences, and I believe even the White House. He's been pretty far, you all. But something I do love so much about Bill Carruthers is that he's connected to recovery, and he's connected to his community. And he serves on the NAMI Georgia Board of Directors. Bill is a person himself in long-term recovery. And Bill is just an amazing resource, like we were just talking about, as it relates to African-American men who have been struggling with mental health-related challenges, recovery-based issues, substance use challenges. He's just a phenomenal resource. And I know that Mr. Carruthers, he's going to give his contact information toward the end as well. But one of the things I love most, too, about Mr. Carruthers is that he always wants you to introduce him like this. He really needs no introduction. But Mr. Bill Carruthers is a person in recovery. He is a certified peer specialist. He's also a certified rehabilitation psychiatric individual who understands the clinical background as well. So the topic that he is going to bring to you today, I'm so excited to hear myself, is called They Called Me a Monster. Looking at the justice system and the effects on our African-American males' mental health. Let's give a warm virtual welcome to Mr. Bill Carruthers. Yay!
Thank you, Dr. Izzy. I would just want to say, man, what a privilege. What an extreme privilege it is to be here with you guys today. I can hear the applause inside my head. You know, I was just listening to the brothers that were speaking, and they spoke into my soul. As I was listening to them speak, you know, I'm kind of selfish because I was saying, man, where were they at all my life? When I was talking to the dude that said, hey, sit up in your chair, listen to what I'm saying, and didn't want to hear anything that I had to say. But anyway, enough of my trauma. I'll get some services later because they did say they do some pro bono work. But anyway, so my name is Bill, and I'm a person in long-term recovery. And I think the long-term, don't get it twisted. It took a long time to get here. Praise God. And I just want to, before we get off to the cosmos, I want to thank that awesome God we serve, man. Whoever yours is, I hope he's working for you like mine is working for me. Because the men of God that shared their testimony today, the brothers who are doing this work, and Dr. Izzy, man, wow. They left no stone unturned. In the face of whatever, we suited up and showed up because of the commitment that we have to service. And so that being said, let me just say, they called me a monster. I'm talking about the justice system. I'm talking about all of those things. My name is Bill Carruthers, man. I'm a person in long-term recovery. And what that means is that I have an extensive criminal history spanning 4 decades. And that's a long time. I don't know if you got 4 decades in the game yet, but that's a long time to be out there in the dark. And so I'm going to give you just a little preface on that. I was born into some unfortunate circumstances, or fortunate today, because it gave me a powerful testimony. But I grew up in some pretty challenging circumstances. The opposite of peer pressure is peer support. My education was negatively reinforced. I think I saw my first body when I was about 5 years old. And so I want to say this. I was locked up long before I actually went to jail. I was locked up on the inside long before I actually went to jail. Jail for a lot of, and let me just say this, that's not an accident. You heard the statistics. That's not an accident. We have to be real about what's going on. Genocidal concepts, societal concepts, all of these things have a very specific design. And a lot of us have been victims of that design. And as we hear today, people are calling things epidemics, and I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking about, they say we have an opioid crisis, epidemic. Man, we got a lot of crises and a lot of epidemics, you understand? But that's another symposium. Let me just say this, that I can remember being 10 years old, looking at television and seeing James Cagney standing on top of a petroleum tower. They're surrounded by police. His mother was out there, his priest was out there, and he was standing on top. And for fear of going to jail, he said, "Look, Ma, top of the world," and he blew himself up. And let me say, when I saw that, I said to myself, that's who I want to be when I grow up. And I, obviously we didn't have a ethnically secure role model for that at that time. We had it in our community, but media, we didn't even have access to have that realistic representation of us in media. However, back then we called it gangsters. I think today we call it thugs, or we got a different language. But one thing that I do know, for my whole life, there wasn't a language for me to understand how to get out of my situation. Where I came from, there was a couple different kinds of crazy, right? There was crazy like you get a check and crazy like you go to jail all the time. I didn't have a language for mental health. I don't know. We've got a room full of therapists here. I can't remember how old I was when I first articulated the word therapy. When people used to say to me, you need to go get some help, I had no understanding of what help was and how help could help me and where I would end up if I got help. Let me just say that. And so in our pursuit to help people, I think it's incredibly important that not only do we tell people they need help, because most of the time when you're telling somebody they need help, they already know. And if they don't know they need help, or they have anosognosia, or they have that type of lack of insight, then it may not be time yet. However, it's always time to pray, but it may not be time to play. I'm just saying. But I do know this, that when I finally went to jail, by then, going to jail for me became so repetitious, and it was actually a badge of honor for me. For me, going to jail was something that was expected. Where I came from, it was expected. And if you hadn't been to jail yet, then you would start to experience some real peer pressure because people didn't think you were thorough or solid or real or with them or whatever, because you ain't been locked up yet. So I do know this, that by the time I went to jail, I already knew how to jail. When I went to jail, it was like, that's where all the people that I just hadn't seen for a while were. That's where my heroes were. And I want you to know that the majority of the time that I was in jail, what I learned how to do, I learned how to become a better criminal. For me, mental health services in jail was a liability, because what they were going to do, in my understanding, mental health treatment at that time was medication. And we called it seeing Dr. Johnson. And when you came back from seeing Dr. Johnson, you was doing a Thorazine shuffle. And that was something that made you so vulnerable in that environment that when they ask you, do you have any mental health challenges? If you did know, you would say no. I just say that to say this. When I was listening to them talk about cultural competency and cultural agility and all of those things are so valid and so real, and those are the very crux of engagement. Engagement is so very important. So, me having an opportunity to be here today, I could tell you a real horror story, and you can Google Bill Carruthers recovery in Georgia, and you can get that information. You can read that story. You can hear that story, because I've been from coast to coast sharing that information, because it is very important that people know we do recover. But let me just say, because it's not dark outside today. My name is Bill. I'm a person in long-term recovery. Today I'm living a dream, virtual fairy tale existence, and I'm going to tell you how that happened. I stayed in that soup for 40 years. By the time I came out, I was 50 years old, and I walked into treatment, and guess what? Treatment, I don't think they were ready yet. Wow. I didn't have a language, and the language they had for me was so stigmatizing, it was so marginalizing, that it made me just kind of not want to engage the process. The only reason that I engaged the process is because I got too old to stay in my other process. you know, the only reason that I engaged the process was because of some of the accountability factors that came as a result of going into that very same system that I had been in. Part of my criminal history is very valid, and I probably needed to have that charge, but another probably 3/4 or maybe closer to half of my criminal history was in the plea bargain phase. It was in that whole system that's designed, if you want to go home, then this is what you do. And yeah, okay, so yeah, where do I sign? Where do I sign? Where do I sign? And that machine gives people some serious baggage that makes recovery, even when people do come into it, it makes it a significant challenge, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Let me say that when I came in, I did not know. People have been telling me my whole life, you need to get yourself together. You're a really smart guy. I don't know why you do this. You know the difference between right and wrong. Let me just say, I did not know the difference between right and wrong at certain times. What was right for me at 10 o'clock in the morning was significantly different than what was right for me at 10 o'clock at night. Let me just say that if you do not have a manual, a map, a GPS, or Google Maps to get you to destiny, and if you've only been exposed to people who are going that way, you do not know how to go this way. You know, people say you need to get a job. I got an extensive criminal history spanning 4 decades, and I've never worked. So when you're telling me to go to Burger King, if you go to Burger King, and you know, and the financial ramifications, mental and emotional ramifications of being in that, and I was hearing somebody talk about the hierarchy of needs, all of that is so very real. It is so very real. So let me just go to the part that is working. My name is Bill. I'm a person in long-term recovery. As Dr. Izzy was saying to you guys, I'm a certified psychiatric rehabilitation practitioner. Shout out to PRA. I'm a certified peer specialist. Shout out to Georgia Council on Substance. Shout out to Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network. I am a forensic peer specialist. Shout out to the network. I am a CPS for addictive disease. Shout out to the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse. I have been on the board of directors for NAMI Georgia for like 6 years. Matter of fact, we jump off the date. Yay. Anyway, so I say that to say this. I got education in all of those systems about not what was wrong with me, but how to enhance what was right with me. I got information about peer support. I got an opportunity to speak to people who spoke my native language and had walked on the path that I had walked. Don't get it twisted. I'm not saying if you got a heart problem, the only person that can help you is somebody else with a bad heart. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying, if you've never popped a socket, and if you've never made some buck, and if you've never done some of the other things that we've had the misfortune to do, then communication about those things and how to traverse the path from there to your destiny has a significantly different look. Because for me, when people said, what do you want to do? I'll be honest with you, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. I knew what I didn't want to do, but I did not know what I wanted to do. And I definitely didn't know how to put together those building blocks. And you know, I heard somebody earlier talk about the faith-based community. Shout out to our God, man. Woo! You know, and I just say that. I had a spiritual awakening in the 12-step program. It wasn't in the church. It was in a 12-step program. I just want to tell you that. You know what I'm saying? And so there's different strokes for different folks. There are all things come together for the good of those that love the Lord and are called according to his purpose, right? And so I can't let my limited vision limit your access to destiny, right? I say that to say this. Man, we've had an opportunity to work with the National Alliance of Mental Illness. Man, you know, I've been all across the United States messaging for them. They have some very powerful programs that are introductory, but I think that what happened for me in that context and in the recovery context is connection. I think the opposite of addiction is connection. I think, I think that I need to be with people who are going where I'm going. I need to be with people who have taken the trip from where I've been. And I need to be with people who can see me functioning in my destiny. If you can't see me functioning in my destiny, then it's going to be hard for you to lead me. And so I do know this, that today I'm also the project developer for the Stepping Up Initiative, which is an initiative that reduces the number of people with mental health challenges and substance use challenges who are in jails. And we know that process doesn't happen specifically in jail. This is about communities, and this is about creating recovery communities. And this is about doing that in an inclusive, competent way. Shout out to Commissioner Williams. Shout out to Judge Beals, Judge Mumford. You know what I'm saying? And recovery may not look like what you think it looks like. Support may not look like what you think it looks like, but that's okay, because this is not a specific individual problem. This is a community problem. This is something that's attempting to challenge the kingdom, and that can't happen. That can't succeed. So what I'm asking you is, what is your role? How do you serve? How do we educate the people? You know what I'm saying? Because I'm going to say this. What a tremendous investment people have made into educating me. What a tremendous investment that has been made into my life, that has monumentally and phenomenally changed my life, the trajectory of my life, and a lot of lives that I've come into contact with. Let me just say that, just speaking of COVID, when COVID jumped off, we had an opportunity to set up digital platforms. We're doing recovery meetings twice a day for participants from accountability courts. We got that thing open. We're getting ready to pump recovery into the jails, because I know that inside those systems, there's a lot of security concerns. There's a big challenge with movement. We don't have enough officers to move everybody. We can bring these digital platforms into your jail, and all you got to do is plug it up to the TV that's in the day room, and we can bring this thing right up in there to you. And this is one of the advantages that COVID had helped us see, that we have to create, because our God is the creator. You feel me? I ain't mad at you. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just saying this, that one of the things, and just shout out to Dr. Izzy for bringing such an eclectic, powerful group of people together, because that's what this is about. These answers, if you could do this by yourself, you would have did it a long time ago. This is kingdom business. You know what I'm saying? And no one left behind, man. And there are everybody's got an assignment, man. And walking into a penitentiary or walking into a jail or talking to me 20 years ago, that might not have been your assignment. You know what I'm saying? Because you might not have had the right kind of head on. You know what I'm saying? And just all of those therapeutic values and boundaries and things like that, because, peer support is a powerful partner in this equation. Peer support changed my life. I just want to say that when I came in and I was working with Opening Doors to Recovery, which was an experimental project, and they picked me and I couldn't believe it, I met some people who were in peer support. And I was saying to myself, I wonder what Buddy's doing here. And I went over and I asked him, shout out to Charles Willows, God bless the dead, And I asked him, I said, man, what are you doing here? He said, I'm a peer support specialist, man. And I asked him some questions, and he told me, I think you would be a great one. And I said, how do I do it? And he said, well, here's my number. Call me, and I'll walk you through it. I think that's the difference, man. Somebody has to put their hands on this situation. You got to put your hands on it. Don't get me wrong. Prayer changes things, right? But I'm talking about put your hands on. I had a lot of people tell me, well, I'm going to pray for you, man. You know what I'm saying? I need you to put your hands on this thing, man. You know what I'm saying? I need you to lay hands on me. We have to marshal our resources in a way that is real. Because above and beyond all, I'll just say this. The truth will set us free. We have to start, these communications have to start transferring the truth, because in that information, people find revelation. It's in this whole just honest, open forums. You know, I hear people talking about, you know, one of the things that we're looking at as far as creating programs. You know, there's been this fallacy out there for a long time about equality, equal distribution, and we know that's a fallacy. And then we talk about equity, and we're talking about liberation. We're talking about, let's just take the barrier down. You know, let's not worry about how to distribute things behind the wire. You understand? Let's get in there. That's where true life changes. True life changes by changing it. You know what I'm saying? So I just say this, the privilege that I have today to have only been in recovery for 13 years, and to be able to stand here in front of you and say that more has happened in my life in the last 13 years than has happened in some people's whole life. I'm just going to say, you know, in the last 13 years, I have not had the need to use a drink or a drug. In the last 13 years, I've had a spiritual awakening. In the last 13 years, I went from a person that didn't even have a GED to a person that's got some alphabets behind his name. You know what I'm saying? But not just that. I'm a different person on the inside. And I just encourage everybody to understand that this recovery is an inside job. And I just encourage everybody to know that this is, you know, this is a community equation. We got to understand how to partner with the people that really need partnership. We got to figure out how to communicate. You know, and we just can't have no as the answer. I can't do that, can't be an answer. There's no answer, can't be the answer. There is an answer. And we all know what the ultimate answer is, but we also know that, you know, there's a pathway to get to the answer. So let me ask you a question. How much time we got left? Okay, so let me just say this. So we're working with the Stepping Up initiative, and that is really about addressing our sequential maps in our communities. It's about really looking at services and really measuring those things that we were talking about, the cultural competency and agility of services. It's really about getting feedback from people. It's about creating recovery community organizations that are peer-driven, because this is the thing, man. No more for me without me. You know, if we want people to recover, we got to involve them in the process. It can't be just a process like a perm. You know what I'm saying? This has to be a process where people actually understand what's happening and the why. People have to understand the why of the process. And I want you to understand that the reason that I came into recovery, and I wish I could stand in front of you and say it was an honorable, admirable equation. I came in here to get away from the police. You feel me? And that's why I came in. But today I'm sold out. Today I'm on kingdom business. Today I've dedicated my life to this concept, because this is another thing that we're asking people to do. We're asking people to change, but are we trying to connect them with purpose? Because for today, the reason I get up out of bed, the reason that I'm here, believe that, you know, other than being a partner to Dr. Izzy, which is, you know, as far as how choice interacts with that, that's a whole nother thing. But the reason I'm here is because of the primary purpose. The reason I'm here is because what I have is so priceless. What I have, I finally got high. All my life I was looking for a high, man, and I finally found it. I found the one that every time I give it away, it increases. You understand what I'm saying? And that, if you read your Bible, that'll line up with your kingdom principles. You'll see how that thing got broke open for me. And so today, I'm actually, you know, for me, when I sit down in meetings and I'm sitting there with the judge and with the commissioner, Dr. Dude, and I'm sitting there, I'm saying to myself, how great is our God, man? You know what I'm saying? Because I can remember when I would walk in a place and they'd have a coffee pot there that said free coffee. And I'd head for that coffee. They'd say, sir, sir, sir. You know what I'm saying? I haven't forgotten that, man. So that's one of the values to peer support. Is people that have been in a place, you know, and that we understand that sometimes when you're looking at a person, man, you know, you don't have to have the right answer. Sometimes, man, it's about connection. Sometimes it's just about that engagement piece. I was listening to Daryl talk. Shout out to Daryl, man, powerful stuff. You know, this is about engagement. It's about engaging people in a different way. This is about really, because I didn't know anything about the Certified Peer Specialist Project, which are people who have lived experience with overcoming mental health challenges. I didn't know about the CARE. Shout out to Georgia Council. I didn't know anything about Certified Addiction Recovery Empowerment Specialists. And those were people that had been in active addiction and now in recovery from addictive disease concepts. I didn't know that they had forensic peer specialists who are people who have been in jail or now working in the system. I didn't know about that. So if we have people that are looking for recovery and they don't know about that, then are we giving them pure service? Are we giving them part service? And so I do know this. We can't have a fake solution to a real problem. This thing is real. And like I said before, the truth will set you free. So we really have to involve all the players, because I know that when you're talking to a psychiatrist, and I've talked to a few, trust me, right? But when you're talking to a psychiatrist, he's probably not going to talk to you about peer support. Because that's not his gig, man. You know what I'm saying? So that's why it's important that we bring all the voices to the table. And that's why it's important that the voices have equal value, that we create a level playing field so that all voices are heard. Because like we heard one of our other presenters say, David hit Goliath in the head, kid. You feel me? And so it's not about the size of the dog in the fight. It's about the size of the fighting the dog. And I do know this. I just want to say this in closing. Everybody deserves to have this moment. You know, I've had so many, like Dr. Izzy was saying, so many privileges and opportunities. I had an opportunity to go to the White House and speak, and I'm really privileged about that. But I'm going to tell you something bigger than going to the White House and speak. Is every day I have an opportunity to speak with somebody. And today I realized that there's this greater value into talking to the guy in front of the Circle K if I have a life transformative message, because there might be a greater propensity for him to change than all those very important people I was talking to at the White House, right? And so there are no big I's and no little U's. Oh man, I just want to say this. I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to Dr. Izzy. I want to say thank you to all the partners. I want to say thank you to this platform. And more than all that, first and foremost, I want to say thank you to that powerful, miracle-working God that's been Lord of my life, that's made me today into who I am, and also has a place for me to walk into and become who I'm designed to become. Thank you all for your time, man. Poof. And we all had on pink shirts. You think, well, yes.
Don't go nowhere, Mr. Bill. We got a question for you. Hold the mic. Well, I'll hold the mic. Come on. Okay. That was just wonderful, should I say, anyway. But I want to get this question to you that came out. So the question says, as a young black man, made emphasis to that, what can I do to avoid getting sucked into what I feel is the world system, even though I feel as though I'm working very hard not to get sucked into that world system? And I'm sure he means that life of crime, at risk, different things like that. And he went on to say, when I feel as though I'm trying so hard to not get involved with those things, what would you suggest that I do to continue to work hard and move forward, moving beyond?
So I would say one thing for sure. We have to figure out how to truly open ourselves up so that we can receive information. I have to truly do that. And then I have found that's breaking my support system into like three people, three different systems of support. And one of those systems of support should probably be based on pure service. I need to figure out how to volunteer, how to give away, how to just really be a pure service. And then I need to find a pure group of people who are where I am or been where I am that are going somewhere. And I need to figure out how to really connect with that so that I can affect the social learning theory. And then I would say I need to figure out how to connect with a group of people who are where or beyond where I am trying to go or designed to go. And that may happen through different media platforms or, just however that works. But those people will probably be very uncomfortable to interact with initially. because we have some perceptions and we minimize and marginalize ourselves inside our heads. But if I can create those 3 platforms of function and kind of function in those, this incredible thing will happen on the inside, and you will find yourself receiving revelation. And it happened to me on my way over here as I was listening to the other speakers. I was listening to them, and I was saying to myself as I was driving, man, where were these dudes in my life? You know what I'm saying? Powerful men of God, powerful black men who are speaking my native language, men of God, just all of that. So I think finding that and just really reaching out for that, and then opening myself up so that I can really receive information in a different way.
And I know, Bill, you spoke, I'm sure, a little bit about the NAMI peer-to-peer program, but I remember hearing you say how that particular program changed your life. Could you share just a little bit more about how valuable that NAMI peer-to-peer program really is, and what made the difference for you?
So I know that when I walked into for my first period, because I had a counselor that told me you need to go to everything. And so I remember walking into that NAMI meeting and just really practicing some reverse discrimination, right? Because I was walking in there and just really being challenged. But if you would have asked me, was I challenged? I said, no, I ain't challenged like these people. And just really having my head just kind of sideways. But as I encountered the class, and I joined the class because they got a stipend. I came in because I'm trying to get some money, right? And so most of my reasons for coming in are totally different for the reasons I'm going out, right? But I say that to say this, as I was sitting in that NAMI class, and they were talking about the science of mental health, and in there, we were talking about the neurotransmitters and dopamines and all that kind of stuff. And in that communication, I realized that there was a chemical process, there was a disease process that was actually part of the reason why I was doing what I was doing. And it was like groundbreaking for me, because I thought I did what I did just because I was a bad man. And that was revelation for me. That broke me down. You understand what I'm saying? And today, when I'm working with people, I can see how we're similar instead of trying to figure out how we're different. You know what I'm saying? Because when I was approaching things with that, ain't nothing like, when I was looking at it like that, it was a significant barrier for me making connection and me truly having empathy and truly being able to receive information. So that kind of broke me open on that level.
And I'm not sure if you did this, but just to bring in a little humor and a little laughter, can you demonstrate what you used to do when you were incarcerated and they would bring you into the psychiatrist or the counselor's room and they felt like that you were a monster? What did you do?
And what was this is the thing, if you tell people they're a monster, they'll probably believe they're monsters. And I can't count the number of times, because when I come in, you got the chains on, and you know what I'm saying? And I used to jump at people just so they would jump. You know what I'm saying? And just kind of be exaggerated, and because I was offended, man. I was hurt, man. And one thing that I do think is really important, and I don't know if we touched on it, in all my life and in all of those different situations, and I've been in state hospitals all across the country, and I've been in penitentiaries and supermaxes and all that, I don't think anybody ever talked to me about the little boy who was displaced from his family because his parents made a mistake or were in active addiction. And ultimately, at 50 years old, I had to go back and find that little boy who was afraid first, looking for his mother. She didn't come. He was traumatized. He was afraid. Then the wolves showed up. He got into survival mode, and then he became something else. And what his real problem was, because people told me my problem was drugs or my problem was drinking or whatever, but my problem was I never healed. My problem was I never addressed that trauma. The problem was I was afraid. You know what I'm saying? And I became something that didn't have to deal with fear. You know what I'm saying? I became a monster. You know what I'm saying? And so one of the biggest things about recovery is not just what you learn, but what you unlearn. Ooh, I ain't mad at you.
Right there, that's deep. He called it for us. All right, you all. Thank you so much, Mr. Carruthers. You all, that was so amazing to think about his life journey, his life history, and where he is now, today. and how he's making an impact all over the nation, right here in our communities here in Georgia, and even going out as a motivational speaker, that means so much. And I'm just so thankful to be connected to him and to have a partnership with him and in Nami, Georgia. Just amazing, amazing. We have a great lineup. So for those of you who are just tuning in with us, again, I am Dr. LaCleisha Izzard, the standing president of the American Counseling Association of Georgia, and you are watching our inaugural multicultural symposium on African American male wellness. And our theme for today is unveiling the complexities of African American males through awareness and best counseling practices. Well, it's not over, y'all. We still have more to give. So we have a few questions. So I want to bring up one of our previous speakers, Dr. Calvin Ellison, and I want to ask him a couple of questions that came in. Come on, Dr. Calvin Ellison. Come on this side. All right. So the question that we received, and I believe this came from our Zoom panel, but the question states, given there is a historical distrust with the healthcare system, how do you think we should better address African American males' lack of attention to their health and their wellness?
Well, that is a reality, and we don't need to close our eyes to what life has shown us. So I'm a firm believer, if you're going to step into something, you step in there with both eyes wide open. You ask questions. You go in with the mindset that, first and foremost, you're the expert on the life that you've been living, and you want to work to develop a relationship with your healthcare provider. He's not God, or she's not God. You've been living with you. So you want to go in with, now I've been living with me. Let's develop a relationship to where I can get the counsel that I need so I can make sure I'm staying on top of my health.
Thank you. Next question says, what does quality health look like for African American males in relation to the national standards, which is bent usually toward Anglo biological makeup? This is from an African American female counselor.
All right, all right. What does it look like? Well, I mean, it'd be wrong for me to compare myself at 5'7" with somebody who's 6'8". You know, I weigh 5'7", 170 pounds, and this person's 6'8", weighing 240 pounds. It'd be wrong for me to compare myself with that individual. I mean, the makeup, what I've done to get to where I'm at. So I believe that we need to look at our own home first. We need to look at our own lifestyle first and not be measured by somebody else's lifestyle. Because we do have it in our community, the information. We have the offices of minority health and various entities that have the data that is specific to us. You need to seek and find those kind of entities like that that have the data, because we do have stuff in our community just like other people have in their community as well. We just got to seek it out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again, Dr. Calvin Ellison. Just great information, great knowledge. Thank you so much. All right, you all. So we are going to continue to move forward with this amazing symposium. Our next presenter we are going to have, and you've already seen him up when he presented me with the President's Recognition Award, but our next presenter is Mr. Darrell Brooks. And I'm going to share a little bit about his background. Mr. Darrell Brooks is and has transitioned from nonprofit management and the political arena to counseling, driven by his passion for developing mental toughness and helping others reach their full potential. With over 10 years of experience in the sports-related industry, Mr. Brooks combines both areas to service the student-athlete, families, and adults. Mr. Brooks is also a past president of the Licensed Professional Counseling Association of Georgia. He was their first African-American male president within that 30-year history at that time. Mr. Brooks earned his master's degree in community mental health counseling at Malone University. He has a wealth of knowledge on student athletes, on the athletic arena, on mental health, clinical health, counseling as a whole. He's done so much, and he continues to serve our community greatly. His topic today, he is going to focus on the mental health stigma among African American males. You all, I really want you to listen up really good to this information, because we have still been experiencing this in 2020. That was one of my main reasons for really wanting to do this symposium focused just on African American males, because many times our men get entrapped in inclusion presentations and conferences. They never usually have their own, okay, that is just focused on them. So he's going to dive in about the mental health stigma among our men. And I'm ready to hear from him too. Let's give a warm virtual welcome for Mr. Darrell Brooks. All right.
Thank you, thank you.
Welcome.
Well, if my mom is watching, she know I run my mouth a lot, so she's probably saying he's about to say something. However, I do get nervous from time to time. And the nervousness is because I'm so much knowledge is coming out that I want to share that I have a hard time trying to focus it in the point that I want to make. So this way, I start off with doing a poem, most of my speeches, and I end with a poem with most of my speeches, just so I can keep it in close. So the one poem I want to talk about, want to give to you, is by Paul Laurence Dunbar. And it should be relevant today because it talks about we wear the mask. We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding hearts, we smile. And mouth with Madrid subtitles. Why should the world be overwise in counting our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but O great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet and long the mile. But the world deem otherwise, we wear the mask. I thought about that poem because I was listening to Sterling Brown earlier while I was doing my research for this topic. Sterling Brown was one of the actors who played Njobu in the Black Panther. Njobu was one of the leaders of the tribe where T'Challa and T'Chaka came from. And so in that tribe, Njobu was a liberator, or they called a war dog, where he went to other countries and other places, where he was in LA, fell in love, and had a son. So when he talked about what was going on today, he reminisced what happened in February of this year with Ahmaud Arbery. Ahmaud Arbery was shut down, gunned down, while he was jogging 2.23 miles because he was black. How does that refer to us in mental health? How does it refer to the African American community? It's the trauma of knowing that some days that we may not be able to come back home. We come out here, we go, we drive in our cars and get pulled over. Never know we might get shot. We begin to have these masks to wear to either make sure we are safe, that we protect ourselves, and sometimes the mask is there for so long that it shames us or holds away what we really need to release. The pain, the fear, and the frustrations, and the agony, anxiety of being who we are, of being human. However, we have to wear the mask, we have to smile. As kids, how we mask our anger. If we have an anger problem, we go out and play football. We play other sports that we release that anger, which is sometimes good. However, when you go to collegiate sports and you begin to have the same anger problem, and then you're off the football field and you do something reckless at a bar, smack a woman, punch somebody in the elevator, those problems now that we've been masked by us playing sports has become now something that we need to deal with on a greater scale. So NAMI, the National Alliance of Mental Illness, has gave us 9 of the 9, what I call 9 ways to break the stigma of mental health. But first, let's define what stigma is. So let me define that first. As it pulls up on my screen, we got the iPad now. Things are so cool now, you can do that, but back in the day, you didn't have all this stuff. Stigma talks about, from the English dictionary, how it is something that is not unique, something that is taught to us in a way negatively. So anything that we do is going to be negative feels, negative connotations. So let's go into NAMI's first of the 9 stigmas. The first one is we talk openly about mental health. In the African American community, we never had the chance to talk openly about mental health because we were always taught the 3 don'ts. 3 don'ts. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. And let me explain how that worked. You're a kid in a family, and if you're socioeconomic, no matter where you're at, something happens where there's an argument at the home, all right? Mom and dad is arguing. You hear them say, I told you to stay off the phone. I don't need nobody over here. Don't do anything like that. And the next day you know, you're trying to go to school and you can't even share that with your teachers because they say, what happened to you? Oh, he failed. Don't tell them what happened here. You don't want nobody in our home. We don't want them coming here bringing CSB, coming here checking our stuff and trying to keep and break the family up. Don't tell them anything. So we don't talk. Something further goes along. Mom, dad arguing again. All of a sudden you hear a smack. And someone storms out, which is probably mostly domestic violence. We'll have that. Next thing you know, Mom, what's going on? What happened? Oh, don't worry about it. It didn't happen. What you heard, you didn't really hear. So now the person that gave life to the young boy or to the young girl or to the child now is lying to the child. So at that point in time, the child begins to not to trust. How do I trust the person that I love all of a sudden is the one that's telling me a lie? Now, if I can't even do that with the person that I love, who's to say I can trust a teacher? Who's to say I can trust a coach? Who said I can trust an evaluator? Who I can say I trust a social worker that's coming to the home? Because now I can't even trust my own parent. And don't feel is the last don't that we have. Sometimes a kid would go back to Mom, I hate the way dad did you. I don't understand why he's got to do that stuff. And she says, son, don't feel that way. Don't feel that way. Don't worry about that. We'll be okay. Don't talk. Don't trust. Don't feel. And now we go to a school system, or now we begin to mature, and all the things that we're going through has been categorized in 3 areas of don't. Don't talk about that. Don't trust anybody. And now you're numb. Where we have people who are we have students that are so numb to the fact that they would do things in broad daylight. They will fight a teacher. They would do things to manipulate the system because of the fact that they had these 3 don'ts in their system. So to break the stigma, talking about these systems and talking about how we can work with these things is great. That's why the Brotherhood of Mental Health, the next episode, and the C2G2 Media Group that we created is part of that. We want to begin to open the dialogue, to share with everyone here about talking about mental health in the African American community. Shout out to those of my colleagues at Malone University, to those who were there with me when I first started classes, because at the first time when I got there, I was coming from law school and became into the class. I was most late, arrogant, didn't care type of person. Walked in, I can walk in 20 minutes late in the class and didn't care, sat back in the back wearing sweats, and my shoes were barely tied up. I made sure I smelled clean though, but still, the fact was that I didn't have a passion at the time. I just wanted to come in here, take the class, get the grades so I could be licensed, and I feel like, hey, this is the opportunity for me because there's not that many African American male counselors at the time. I was usually either the only one in the classroom or the second. It would be three of us that we were there. But we were only African Americans in the classroom. And to go through all of that, and I contribute to all the ones that helped me out. Miss Dominic, she probably know who she is. We developed a pact where I was able to move forward. They never knew about where I came from the side of the mini part of Canton, Ohio, of Hartford Junior High School, where they considered that was a third world middle school. People were savages over there. They didn't know I was one of those students from Hartford. But we never thought of ourselves as savages or monsters. We thought of ourselves as individuals that had talent. We thought of ourselves as people that we knew we had to get ready to move to the next level. We wore the mask. And sometimes we did things that we shouldn't have done because being just ordinary kids. But at the end of the day, we still kept our grades up. We still moved forward to go into high school. Some of us went to college. Some of us are attorneys. Some of us are doctors. We moved forward. But at that time, they never looked at us that way. So as a kid, when you're seeing people telling you, and just like our last speaker, when they put that stigma on you, then you're either going to be the best that stigma offers, or you're going to do things to exaggerate and keep yourself hidden from truly hiding the pain or masking the pain. So talking about it is one of those things that we need to do. We educate. The second one is educate ourselves and others. Gratefully, this platform is doing that. We are educating. We are motivating. We are delivering these types of ways to communicate to the world about mental health. And not just African American community, but to all communities, because we're talking about diversity and inclusion. But we're specifically talking to the ones that we know where we're from our experiences, helps us bring others to the table. It is the year 2020, and I have seen throughout my 10 plus years down here and 8 years back home in Ohio, have seen so many African American men in counseling. I've seen so many graduate. I've seen so many pursue their doctoral degrees in counseling education. And that brings me warmth to be a part of this, to be something that started where I was leaving law school and just wanted to get into a program. And I began to develop a passion from it, from the teachers that taught me, from the Dr. Kurtzes, the Dr. Murs, all of those doctors that were there that helped me understand that this is more than just what you think it is. We're changing lives. We're liberators. We're also those who we call the civil rights movement. To me, it's a new era of that, because now we're helping them with the mental toughness to be willing to go through the extra mile, go through extra things, even though that pain and guilt. Like I said, life ain't no crystal stair. Keep pushing. That becomes mental toughness. Be conscious of your language is the third one. How do we be conscious of our language? We can't say, well, as we do in our neighborhood, yeah, she crazy, she got bipolar. That's that girl with bipolar. Or that's that dude, he's got schizophrenia. Watch out for him. Or like you saw in Soul Food, the uncle that was in the room that was closed up and everybody was scared of him, probably suffered a mental illness, but in there they made it so closed up, they made it like it was just a problem. So we cannot say that they have a problem or call them the problem. We have to say they're suffering. That has a different light when you say someone is suffering. Like we are with this coronavirus. We're suffering. We're trying to move forward. We're trying to begin businesses. We're trying to see how we can live with one another in a house that we was used to be away from for a while. All of a sudden now we're still under the same roof for a lot of hours. How do we be able to develop that? And just like we said, other speakers talked about it, the increase of domestic violence, the increase of sexual misconduct and sexual assaults during this time frame. But we need to have this platform to share, to show that there are positive sides of this, that people can overcome these obstacles or these disorders or dis-ease that we call it, and not call the individual what they are, a monster, but they are suffering. And that changes your tone then when you say you're suffering. The next one is encourage equality between physical and mental illness. Breaking that stigma of physical and mental illness. And the one doctor, and I want to say his name, talked about how the physical illness contributes or is part of mental illness. when you're suffering with high blood pressure, when you're suffering from bad eating habits, because then all of a sudden you're not that viral person anymore. You're not that person that has the energy. All of a sudden you become depressed or you become frustrated that things that you used to do you can't do anymore. Joints hurt. When you used to play basketball and you were one of the top players and all of a sudden now you're not even recognized anymore. They can't see who you are, or you was on that team that won the championship. Next thing you know, you're out on the side of the street talking to people like you're talking to cars and you're homeless. A lot of that stuff comes from suffering, from depression, losing that chances. Okay? Now, here's the thing about when we talk about that, the equality of that, you'll have individuals because of the physical illness, for example, high blood pressure. You might have someone go in there, like a man go in there and say, hey, you know what? He goes in to get his medication. And he's talking to the pharmacist telling him how much it is. That's a lot of money for all this medication I got to get. But you need it. You know what? He's probably going to say, you know what? I don't need high blood pressure medication. Just make sure I get my medication for Viagra. You know? That's a little joke. But the main thing is, he needs to understand he needs both his medication. They're not just for the Viagra, but he definitely needs high blood pressure medication. It's just a little joke there. But if y'all didn't take it, don't worry about it. Let it go over y'all's head. All right? The next one is show compassion for those with mental illness. All right? Just like I said before, understanding that when we change the name from suffering into saying the person has bipolar, or this person, and always want to say they have bipolar. A kid that running around, he's ADHD. No, he's not. You done gave him some sugary cereal and went into school, had Frosted Flakes, Fruit Loops, Captain Crunch with Crunch Berries, all that sugary snack, and then you send him to school, of course he's going to be amped up. So it is part of your diet. So we have to look at things like that. All right? Choose empowerment over shame. That is what this platform does. We encourage, we empower. We don't shame anybody who suffers from a mental illness, or we don't shame anybody who suffers from substance abuse, because they already feel shame enough. So the main things that they're trying to do is that they want to see someone give them that opportunity to feel like, include them in, talk to them, share with them. During my times here, when I worked in community-based counseling, I met with a lot of veterans. I'm a veteran myself, so a lot of mental homeless veterans. And for them, just talking about situations of MREs and the days that we did boot camp and how was it when we did training, you could see them light up. And then, or if I say, hey man, let's go shoot some hoop. Well, I used to shoot. Don't worry about it. We're just hanging out. They light up because now they're included. They're empowered. They're not shamed for if they smell bad, or if someone like, when you deal with those who are homeless and you talk about, let's get them a hot shower. We ran a program where we took them to a hotel room where they got a hot shower. We had to monitor the hotel room because normally once they get a hot shower, they feel like they can go ahead and bring their little alcohol up in there and stuff like that. But you say, no, you can't do that. And that happened before. But it's still the fact that we gave them that opportunity. And it made them feel empowered and made them not feel shamed. Let's be honest about treatment's the other one. All right, treatment sucks. That's just the way it is. When you're dealing with recovery or you're dealing with relapse, some people can relapse one time and some people it's an ongoing relapse. And that's when the family gets tired and says, well, you should have been better. You don't went to Peachford, or you don't went to the state hospital. Why are you still acting up? You still go see a counselor. The medication should work. We don't spend all this money on this meds. You should be better. But it doesn't happen that way sometimes. Some people might need a 12-step program, a 24-step program. You never know. But what it does say is that we should be more encouraging to tell them how treatment's going to be. When I have my private practice and I have some of my clients who I have to do what we call 1013 or a mandatory hold where we got to send them to the hospital, I tell them, look, I'm writing up this 1013. You are acting in behaviors that are beyond control. We need to get you to a place to be stabilized. Now, when you get there, it's not Club Med. You're going to get there. You're going to be sitting in a room for hours on end and somebody barely going to talk to you. And if they do talk to you, they're just going to make sure that you are who you are and what you have done, and make sure of that. When you get there and they begin to get you through treatment, you got to go through the treatment. You might say they're going to tell you who your doctor is. You might not see that doctor. He might only last and come see you for about 5 minutes. So you're not going to have the true therapeutic experience with this person because they're trying to stabilize you and get you out of there within 5 days. If you comply with everything they say, you out of there in 5 days. I can't talk to you at that time frame, but I will come and visit once you sign the release form of information so I can come see how you're doing. And some of my clients who have done that, who have been 1013, really appreciate the fact that I told them how treatment is. It's not easy. It's not what you see on television where you're going to be going to a celebrity place and you get to see all the celebrities and all that stuff. This is rougher than the rough. I felt it was like jail. And maybe it is. But then you will see one thing about it is that your problems or what you're going through, what you're suffering from, can be changed if you have the right team around you. All right? Let's talk about let the media know about being stigmatized. For me, through NAMI, this is their statement. My statement is let us be the media to talk about how to reduce the stigma. So if they do statements that call to enhance it, then that's something. But for me, by having this platform to help reduce it is the way I would use that. Last but not least, don't harbor self-stigmas. We are the worst critics of ourselves. We suffer from some of the things that we suffer from, and no one, when it comes to mental illness, it doesn't discriminate. It's not something that looks at your socioeconomic background. When it hits hard. And when families suffer along with the individual. And it's up to those families to understand that they need counseling too. It's not just the person's problem. It's a family problem. And that family has to rally around that person, no matter how many times they mess up, no matter how many times they relapse. If the family gives up on them, then what you think the individual is going to do? The individual is going to give up. So those are the steps for that to reduce the stigma. And like I said, I always like to begin with a poem and end with a poem. And the poem that I want to end with is the one by Marianne Williamson about our deepest fear. Okay? Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightening about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We are born with the manifestation of God, the glory of God that is within us. And not just some of us. It's in everyone. And as we let our light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we liberate ourselves from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And what I'm saying in closing is to understand that when we, and I thank for us having this platform, and all the brothers that came here was able to let their light shine, liberated me to let my light shine. We didn't just stay with the fear of how we're going to act on this first virtual symposium. We were waiting for a big crowd. We were waiting for an honorarium. Hey, we was, I'm the only one that's not wearing a pink. Well, there's somebody wearing a white shirt, but I got the tie. But we sat together, and when we began to formulate this program, no one in that, and I can say it, no one was the alpha male. There was nothing like that. It was more of, we are a team. We are going to work together. We are eclectic. We come from different various backgrounds, and we're going to let each other shine, and we're going to support everyone in that. So I'm honored to be part of this. I'm glad the Brotherhood of Mental Health became the platform to use this, because our goal was to do this, was to bring brothers together, to share their stories, to move forward, to make a difference in one person's life. Now, it doesn't have to be many. We're not here to make millions of dollars, because if it was, I'd have just stayed in law school and then been an agent and hopefully caught the next LeBron James or somebody like that, but I didn't do that. But I'm catching the ones that want to be LeBron James and keeping them on the right path to make sure. I'm catching the other athletes that want to be good in their sports and understand how to control their anger, how to use that to the good, and also be able to maintain the focus of what they're trying to do. And I'm saying there's a greater goal in life, and not just sports and money. But the greater goal is to empower and to teach someone and leave a legacy behind. With that being said, I'm Daryl Brooks of the C2G2 Media Group. Peace.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, Mr. Brooks. That was so wonderful. Looking at the mental health stigma among African American males, and he gave us so much that was incorporated in that. And we are just so grateful and so thankful that we had this platform today for him. Again, those of you who are just joining us or tuning in, I am Dr. LaCleisha Izzard, the standing president of the American Counseling Association of Georgia. And this is our inaugural multicultural symposium, all on African American male wellness. And our theme is unveiling the complexities of African American males through awareness and best counseling practices. As we move forward, we got a question from one of our previous presenters, which was Mr. Bill Carruthers. This question goes to you. And it goes a little something like this. Mr. C, thank you for sharing your life journey. Congratulations on justice, substance recovery. What advice do you have for men and women who are in the midst of the plea bargaining process to finding freedom and recovery?
Well, just let me say that first and foremost, we see the very true need for, and we today, I know we were talking about psychiatry and mental health professionals and all that, but in all professionalism, all of the different spectrums, we need to have this culturally competent approach. So we really need to try to find and incorporate and become the people that are providing the service, that competent service. But let me go back to the question. The question being, first of all, I need to try to make this plea bargain, if I'm in that plea bargain situation, and if it's an inescapable conclusion, I need to make this one my last one, right? And I need to understand that platform of plea bargaining is building me up to having an extensive criminal history spanning 4 decades, and then when you do come into recovery, you've got all these barriers. So, I can't undo what's been done, but I need to make that my last plea bargain. I need to really try to find, I know the Georgia Justice Project, they have lawyers and people of that nature that specifically partner with us in those situations to try to give us the most competent services and support and defense to prevent ongoing legal issues. So I need to try to find those type of projects. And if you're just dealing with your local public defender or whatever, you need to try to do your best to try to advocate for yourself. Get that done. Don't do it again. Try to identify what the true core issues are so those issues don't reoccur. And Dr. Izzy brought to my attention that when I was on before, I didn't say if anybody out there wants to try to get in touch with me, you can reach me through my website, Bill Carruthers, recoveryonfire.com, or you can reach me at 912-656-9566. You can also reach me at Rockdale County, the Stepping Up Initiative Project through the Board of Commissioners Office. Please don't die with your music inside you.
All right. You said that, Mr. Carruthers. That was wonderful. So I do hope that answered your question. Any other questions, please feel free. Put them in the chat, put them in the comments box. If we miss anything, do know I will make sure to reach out to the men personally to get your questions answered. But I think we have been doing a great job. I have been doing a great job with keeping up with all of the questions and comments that are coming in. I hope that you all have enjoyed today. We have one more final presenter, and I'm so excited for him to come. He is last, but he is definitely not least. So you all are in for a full treat. Again, all of our presenters today, they needed no introduction, but I wanted to make sure that I gave them a thorough introduction so that you know just a little bit about their background. But once they present and once they speak, you get the opportunity to know them up close and personal virtually. So our next presenter is Mr. Antonio Johnson, who is now Overseer Antonio Johnson. He is the overseer for Anointed Word Assemblies. Mr. Johnson served in the United States military for 17 and a half years, 12 years of active service, 5 and a half of Army National Guard, until he was medically discharged. During Mr. Johnson's time in the military, he specialized in infantry, okay, and was deployed multiple times to serve our country in combat. Mr. Johnson is a United States veteran in mental health recovery. He is going to speak to us today about his own personal story as it relates to mental health recovery and being a United States veteran. The title of his topic is My Story. African American male United States veteran, was there help for me? So let's give a warm virtual welcome for Overseer Mr. Antonio Johnson. All right.
I'm out big enough. Thank you, Dr. Izzard, for this opportunity. Thank you, family out there in the virtual world, for being able to come forth to share a little bit of my testimony about the trauma that I had, the trauma that I went through as a veteran, being an African American male. Well, let me ask this question: Was it truly any help for me as an African American male in the military? The reason I ask that question is due to the fact of there was times where I was going through some things, but I didn't know how to deal with it or who to turn to, due to the fact of the stereotype that the military has for us as soldiers, period, is that if you're sick or something or you're dealing with some issues, you keep it to yourself and go on and make sure the mission is completed. The mission was first and most important. But the thing is, once I got out the service, I found out, that I had some things that were going on with me. I really didn't understand what the problem was, so I kept dealing with it. But see, in today's society, they have it to the fact that men are supposed to be so strong. We would say it's a crime for us to even show any sense of emotions unless it's us acting out. But I'm here to tell you that by getting help dealing with some of my situations, it has made me better. Because most of the therapy that I have been through in my recovery stages have been not your traditional therapy, but more of a spiritual therapy. I was blessed to be placed under the care of an awesome counselor, an awesome doctor, that she did not do traditional therapy with me, but God put it in her spirit to come at me spiritually. And when she came at me spiritually, I was more receptive of opening up, sharing my story, how I felt, and the things that I went through while I was in the military and once I got out. Because most of the thing that most people don't realize, like 30% of soldiers, they develop mental problems within 3 or 4 months after returning home. Most African Americans and Hispanics, we are sensitive to issues, but we are the ones that we like to keep stuff bottled up. And see, when you keep it bottled up, it destroys you on the inside. While the world is looking at you like, oh, he's so strong, but they don't understand that you are dying on the inside. But see, that counselor, she took me in, she started dealing with me spiritually. At first, the first couple sessions, I said that I was looking at her like she was crazy. Because I'm like, I'm less than a man if I open up and show some kind of emotion, remorse. But as an African man and as a veteran, I was trained. Don't show no soft side. You stay firm and stay stern. Keep driving forward. But I tell you like this here, she did not give up on me. I felt the sense of prayer. And even when my wife stayed nagging, I considered nagging at the time about going to get help for my issues, about the nightmares and everything. We found a level field that we can play on together where the spirit moved, and that's when the healing process started. Okay, I want to just convince men don't supposed to cry. Men don't supposed to show emotion. But let me tell you, once I started going through the counseling session, letting my counselor in, Dr. Izzard, which we see it up front, she's my counselor. And it's to her, let her be a willing vessel and listening to God that I'm where I'm at now. I can cope with things totally better than before. Or before, you come at me a certain way, I'm going. The only thing I know is go for the jugular. I'm trying to cut your throat up. But let me tell you, with that spiritual counseling versus that book counseling, it doesn't work. So here's the thing: you have to find someone that's going to work with you and be able to listen and hear your side of the story. Someone that's going to understand where you're coming from, and someone that can deal with the stuff that you don't been through. Everybody's not called for that assignment. Because see, I'm a godly man now. I trust and believe in everything God said is a calling. But see, that trauma that I had with the nightmares and everything, yes, don't get me wrong, I'm human. I still have those nightmares. I still have some of the issues, but I'm still working my way through them. You know, I go back on the key things, the techniques that show if I'm getting triggered somewhere, I think about what I have been taught. It has made life more easier and more able to be a burden. Instead of being a burden as I feel as though I'm helpful, I'm useful now. Because the thing is, people would look at you at the outer appearance and don't understand you have wounds on the inside as a Black American veteran. There's wounds that we walk around with. There's stuff that we have seen, have experienced, but we do not want to talk about it because we're going to make it feel like we're less than a man. But let me tell you, brothers, get somewhere, get some help, open up. Let someone that generally is concerned about your well-being know what's going on. Help is out there for us, but was the help there when we was in the military? We don't know. Because due to the fact that most of us, if you were like me, you didn't want to go and be called a wimp. Old sick called ranger, sick called junkie. You know, you're lazy, you know, you're looking for something. Looking for a way out of training and things. But up here is something that we have to deal with, and it's a very sensitive thing. That you got to seek help. But you got to make sure you get the right help. You can't be scared to come forth saying, I need help. I'm here to tell you, you got to request help. But you got to make sure it's the right help. And you can't be fearful about what the stigmatization gonna be on you if you go forth and ask for help. See, we're in this time right now that we got to turn back to our first love, which is God. And God will place the people that in front of you that could get you where you need to be. Brothers and sisters, I know I'm supposed to be speaking about the African male, Afro-American male, but see, the thing is, in my story, let's talk about, I talk about the problems. You know, I even got to the point where I was on serve in the military where I was drinking every day. Due to the issues that I had, that I had in the military, you know, little inside scoop. Let me tell you about what I tried to do one afternoon after I got some news about my commander was going to push the issue about abandonment charges that I had, and then some fraudulent checks came in that when I say fraudulent, that my hand signature was forged. So all that had compounded, and they was talking about they were going to give me an Article 15. I tried to kill myself, take my own life. Because I did not realize that there was help there to help me. There was somebody that I could cry out to that would actually listen to what I was saying. Yeah, I spent maybe a week, I think like a week or two on the mental health ward at the installation I was stationed there. Oh, they wanted to say there was a cop-out to try to get out of getting this Article 15. But see, here's the thing. My chain of command didn't realize there was something emotionally wrong with me. The psychiatrist, the major, she actually seen that I had issues that needed to be dealt with that my chain of command wasn't understanding. See, but me being still proudful, wanting to be the soldier, the best soldier that I could be, I still kept my mouth shut about what was going on with me. See, stress had got the best of me. Depression had got the best of me. That the fact of that I was willing just to give my life up, and at the time I had 3 beautiful kids. But I was traumatized because I didn't realize that it was help there for me, or was it? You know, it took, after I got out of the military in 2012 to realize that I need some help. My wife talked to me, and I agreed with her to keep my marriage going, to go seek me some help. And I found the help. I found what I was looking for. I found the person that I can talk to. I found someone that could help me get rid of these demons that was in me. See, there's a lot of us that have served this country, and we have inner demons. You know, they say you possess. I was possessed. Because I really didn't know about was the help for me. I didn't understand that conception. All I understood was the conception of I'm a soldier. And I fight for my country, and I'm proud to be a soldier. But see, the thing is, we fall in that category of being so tough and buff. I remember the trauma that I had the first time I even broke down crying. About what was going on with me, and starting to realize that I was traumatized. And I was more traumatized than I really realized that I couldn't deal with it. I thought I was able to handle everything, but was the help for me? I was looking for help, but I didn't know how to go about finding the help. See, I still knew something wrong. See, African Americans and Hispanics, we are more susceptible of having PTSD versus our white counterparts. And we don't realize, most of us don't want to realize how traumatized we are. I have friends that have lost family due to the fact they were traumatized. I like to lost my family due to the fact I'm traumatized. Not realizing that you're mentally traumatized and not having the help, it will cause you to lose everything that you can have. There's so many of us that are on drugs, have alcohol problems, because we didn't realize it was we didn't know it was help there for us. But the thing is it the right help for you? Or they just gonna look at you as a statistic, or they're gonna look at you as the individual? And see, I have to give kudos off to Dr. Izzard, because she looked at me not as an individual, but as a spiritual child of God. See, God is a healer. I still suffer, I still go through my things, through some of the issues, but I'm in a better place than I was when I first met her 5 years ago. Okay? Now, God has gave me the ability to be able to share my story with others, so therefore it might be able to help someone else, even our brothers that's on active duty. I want you to understand. If you're feeling a little strange, a little weary, it's a couple things I want you to do. Seek help, for one. Secondly, seek God, most of all. Thirdly, tell somebody that you need help. Don't worry about what they say about you or how they look at you, but get some help. Do not be traumatized and bring that traumatization home with you, because it tears up a family. As we already know, black men, we already stereotyped. We loud, we angry, we uncoachable, we unteachable. But see, that's a lie. That's a lie. We are brilliant. We are beautifully made. We are bold. And God loves us all. But see, with that trauma had me feeling these things that I'm telling you that you are, my brothers. Dr. Izzy will tell you, I was a hot mess when she met me. I was stubborn. I was angry. I remember when she asked me, do you feel safe at home? Yeah, I'm sure I'm safe at home. She said, do you feel homicidal? Now that there, I ain't finna try to kill myself. I'm about ready to kill somebody. This is the trauma that this stuff would have you to do if you don't seek the right help. Don't fall into that stigma that the military has, that you got to be about the mission. Yes, you can be about the mission, but you also need to be about your health, your mental health wellness. Brothers, look out for you with your mental health. Do not be traumatized, or do not be brainwashed into that pro quo about you're a soldier and you can do anything. Because you're a human being first before you're a soldier. You're a brother or a sister before you're a soldier. You're a father or a dad. You're also one of God's children. So you're human, basically. You can need help. Get the help. I thank God for Dr. Izzard. So that's my spiel. Y'all be blessed and get the help. Don't go at this with this mental trauma by yourself. Seek the help.
Job well done, Mr. Johnson. Thank you so very much. Again, if there are any comments, any questions, go ahead and still put them in the chat. Like I said, we can get to you. We can get these questions answered to you if needed. You all, we have had just a phenomenal, lineup today. And again, for those who are just joining us, I am Dr. LaCleisha Izzard, the president of the American Counseling Association of Georgia, and you have been watching or are watching right now our inaugural multicultural symposium on African American male wellness, where our theme today is unveiling the complexities of African American males through awareness and best counseling practices. Well, that concludes our lineup. We have had so many, seven amazing presenters. We started off with the Reverend James Woodall of the NAACP of Georgia chapter. He is the current president. Okay, then after that, we had Dr. Darren Cooper, licensed clinical social worker. He spoke to us about trauma. Mr. Woodall spoke to us about the insidious parasite of racism and microaggressions. Then we went on and we had Mr. Dow Russ, and he spoke to us about everywhere he laid his hat was his home. Remember the Temptations song, everywhere he laid his hat was his home. He broke it down. Don't let that be your song. Then we moved on and we had further dynamic speakers. We had Dr. Calvin Ellison. He spoke to us about the physical and mental health plague. Then we had Mr. Bill Carruthers. He spoke to us about the criminal justice system and its effects on our African American males. Then we went on and we had Mr. Dow Brooks, and he spoke to us about the mental health stigma. And then last but not least, we had Mr. Johnson talking to us from his own personal story, being a United States veteran and being traumatized. I have just been so full, you all, today, so blessed, so thankful that we were able to come into you all's homes on today via virtual live stream, Zoom. We are so grateful for all of our technology that we have now today going through this new norm that we're experiencing. We can still connect, you all. We can still connect. So I just want to give a few final thank yous to our sponsors that made today happen, okay? First, I want to thank our national association, which is the American Counseling Association. It is the largest counseling association in the world. Our CEO is Richard Yep. I thank him so much for believing in my vision and for allowing us to have this symposium on today. Then I go on to thank the Berean Christian Church for allowing us to use their location and promoting this event to their men, for we have over 10,000 members, so it's amazing that we could be able to allow them to come in and join us as well. I'll give a special thank you to Mr. Robert Manley of the NAMI Georgia Rockdale Newton Board for his support, assistance, and contributions. I also give a special thank you to Minister Dolores Herron of the World Changers Ministry for her support and her sponsorship of the President Recognition Award. I also give a very, very warm and special thank you to my close, immediate family supports, my mother, Lita Izzard, and my father, James Evans of High Point, North Carolina, in Kernersville, North Carolina. I love you so much. Thank you for your support. My beautiful uncle, Clarence Izzard of Orlando, Florida. Thank you so much for always being by my side and encouraging me and giving me more and more wisdom each and every week. Thank you. And to my late grandmothers, Lily Bell Darby Izzard and Nellie Lee Johnson, for instilling in me the commitment of servant leadership and community service. Without them instilling this in me, you all, I would not be able to stand before you as a Madam President of a major counseling organization. I, again, am just so joy-filled and excited about what has took place on today. At the end of this, please share, share, share. Share it with your brother. Share it with your son. Share it with your uncle. Share it with your nephews. Share it with as many people as possible that you know need this information. And lastly, come on up, Mr. Brooks. I do want to give special recognition and thank you to Mr. Darrell Brooks. He provided the production on today, you all, via sponsorship. All of this was sponsorship, you all, to make this symposium happen. We know that things like this cost, technology costs, webcams, cameras, visuals, all of that costs. But he did this out of the kindness of his heart because he understood the importance of today. So thank you again, Mr. Darrell Brooks. I also thank your assistant, who you cannot see, who's behind the scenes, his brother. Say your brother name.
Yeah, that's Adrian Brooks of Twin Strike Productions. He also has his own studio, so we're working together, doing some things, collaborating. He had just moved down here to Atlanta, too, so this is his first time working with me together, and I'm so honored to have my brother with me. It does a lot to see my baby brother do this stuff. Now, he's not a baby anymore. He says that, but, he's still considered a baby brother to me. But I love this guy a lot, so I thank you for his family, my wife, my 3-year-old son, Donovan, my family back home in Ohio. Shouts out to the Ross family, to the Massey family, to the Massey clan, everybody up there who saw this, everybody on Facebook, the Facebook family, to all the YouTubers, to all the LinkedIn families. Thank y'all for supporting us and watching this, and hopefully we keep making this greater. We need y'all support. We need y'all help. Any other topics that y'all want us to talk about, make sure you bring those on there so we can do that as well. And now when I have my brother down here, definitely we're going to be doing some things that's going to make it work out. But we always wanted to say this to you, Dr. Izzard. Like I said, you're tenured, you're starting your profession as Madam President.
With that. All right, you all. So without further delay, we are getting ready to sign off. But if you want to get in contact with me personally, please go to my website. That is ShekinahCTS.com. Also, if you want to email me, it's ShekinahCounseling@gmail.com. I'll be sure to go in and put it in the chat, too, for the live stream for those of you that need it. All right. Goodbye out there in virtual land. Thank you again for joining us.